Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Pirkei, Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. It's always a joy to be with him. We've been going at this hard now for a number of weeks with chapter 2, Mishna 6, and today Rabbi's got part 6 of this Mishna, so it's going to be exciting. I hope you guys caught all of the last ones. He's always got something great to say, so let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Coffman, you're looking good today. How are you?
Doing great. Always a pleasure to be here, as usual. And right, we're on part 6. We're probably going to hit part 7, part 8. We'll see about part 9, right? But we're definitely here by part 6. Whatever, it's interesting Mishnah that, just to recapitulate, that the Mishnah says that it used to say a boor is someone who cannot be fearful of sin, right? We explained that doesn't really know anything, never learned by anybody, which we're going to see now. Clear, an unlearned person cannot be scrupulously be pious, right? So we see that there's a difference between someone who doesn't really know anything, someone who's, let's just say in the vernacular, is a little bit uncouth, right? Never came across Torah, never learned by anybody. An unlearned person is someone else, right? Someone who's unlearned cannot be pious. And, we've seen why that is, but a boor is worse. A boor is definitely someone worse. So now the question is, what we're going to hit now is, who's considered someone who's a chassid, right? What is a chassid, right? Normally we'd say a chassid, what's the root of the word? Chet, samich, dalid, for chesed, right? Those acts of loving kindness.
Beautiful.
Right now you might say, well, if we say who's a chassid today, you'll say, they wear fur hats on Shabbos, they got long coats, they probably speak Yiddish. They eat calf's feet, soup, maybe Friday night. That's only by Hungarians. I remember I was once by someone for Shabbos, and they have, they serve this Friday night. They were modern Orthodox, but they had this, I guess they had this tradition. They were from Hungarian Jews. So they serve what they call pacha, right? Pacha is nothing less than calf's feet, right? Calf's feet, soup. I said, listen, if you cut off the toenails, I'll eat it. But I said, otherwise, I'll respectively pass. So in any case, a chassid, who is considered a chassid? Somebody who has a relationship with his creator, but does more than the law requires.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In other words, a person can keep all the mitzvahs. They can keep Torah, they can keep mitzvahs. Problem is that if they don't go beyond the letter of the law, right? Meaning they only keep what the Torah says. They don't go beyond the letter of the law. They can be disgusting in God's eyes. Right? In other words, you can say, what do you mean? I keep Torah. I keep mitzvahs. I keep what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so big deal that I don't go beyond the letter of the law. Right? I don't go the extra mile. If I don't go the extra mile, does that really matter? Right? The Talmud tells us that places were destroyed and people destroyed because they stayed on the letter of the law. Right? In other words, we can get into pickiyun detail. And there's a lot of detail what it means to be a Jew. We got no problem obligating people what to do. No question about it. But there are times where even though the Torah will tell me do X, there are times I should go beyond that. Right? In other words, I'll give an example. Probably not a good example, but I'll give an example. Right? Imagine, God forbid, someone's done something wrong against us. Right? Someone damaged us. And we understand, as Avos says, in duties of the heart, in the gates of faith and belief in God, he says anything happens to you, you have to look at the person like a stick. Right? Just like, God forbid, a person hits a dog, right, with a stick. Who's the dog go after? The stick. Doesn't go after the person wielding the power. So if someone was texting, God forbid, go through a red light, and I had a great opportunity this week to have to take a refresher driving course, because here in Israel they have a new law If you got your license within 5 years, you have to take a course for 2 days. It used to actually be 3 days. 4 hours a pop. Can't even tell you how exciting it was. With the instructions made it actually kind of interesting. But even if you had your license for a long time, if you got your license within 5 years, which I did, in my American license expired a long time ago, right? Never thought I'd, need a driver's license here in Israel. Okay. So 5-6 years ago, I got a license. I start from scratch, the theory test, I had to take a driving test and all that. But in short, within 5 years, right after 5 years, you have to take this course. Now, when you take this course, you have to take it's a 2-day course, and if you don't take the course, you don't get to renew your license, right? So it's a whole racket, right? They're making good money. They had 4 separate classes going on. Could be some of them were basic classes, not refresher course. 30 people in a class for like $75. So you do the math. That's good money, and that's only one place, right? So anyway, I had to take this driving course. Then you had to take a test, right? So at the end, it used to be you get a 20 question test. You had to get 7 right, right? So you had to get like, not even a 50, right? Less than that.
Wow.
So what did they do?
35%.
They shortened it. So you have 10 questions. You had to get 5 right. Now they give you a booklet. They don't give you, at the end of the first class, they give you a booklet to study from, right? So you basically have to get a 50. Now, I would say, like, if you had to get your permit in general, when I was in the States, you had to get 7 out of 10. And you had to be an absolute moron not to pass, right? So the questions were obvious. So here, okay, try and trick you here, try and trick you there. But, if you memorized it, you're probably okay. So when I take my theory test, you had to get 26 out of 30. Now, 26 out of 30 is a little more difficult because there are like 3,000 questions they choose from, right? And it's totally random. So, there are certain things that obviously, you have to do. There are certain rights of way. There are certain things that, you're obligated. You're obligated in general, to know according to the law.
Beautiful.
Et cetera. But, I was sitting there sweating at the end because I said, okay, I got a number right. There's no question. The question is, did I get enough right? So what do? So they send you an email. If you passed, you get a certificate. And now once you get the certificate, you got the golden opportunity to actually have to pay to renew your license, right? Which is not a small amount of money. I mean, I'm not saying it's so significant, but it's only going to cost you $10 or $15. Probably going to cost you like maybe 100, right, or more, right? But now you have this merit, to be able to do that. So whatever, it's just an interesting, it was an interesting experience, going through that. Oh, so why do I mention that? Because someone was texting and hit you, right? I have to go back to my parable here. I got lost, right? Someone hit you. They were texting, they damaged your car. Let's say you didn't get injured, but what's the first thing you're going to do? You get out of your car, you're screaming at the person. You're absolutely screaming at the person, right? But at the end of the day, why are you screaming at the person? You were supposed to get damaged. God wanted you to use this person in order to get to you to get damaged. So, okay, so why am I getting upset, right? Because now I have to get my car fixed. Insurance may go up. I have to get a loaner car and whatever. I'm totally inconvenienced. Okay, I'm healthy. I don't look at the benefits over here. I don't look at what I went through. All these different things. Now, the Chovos Levavos there says very hard thing. The Chovos Levavos there says, you know what? In order for you to, work on your emunah, to work in your belief in God, what does God do? He puts you in this situation. So when the person ran through a red light, went through a stop sign, was texting, whatever the case is, smashed into your car after you just got it waxed, right? You got it waxed, squeaky clean, boom, right? They smash into your car. And so what does the Chovos Levavos say over there? You should be so happy, you should run over to them, give them a hug. That's what you should do. Because they're giving you a golden opportunity to work on what? Anger. Of course the person's got to be angry, right? So, the person can say, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this. And what happens? You're rip-roaring mad, right? It comes along God and says you got an opportunity now. They're coming to ask for forgiveness, right? They just ruined your Lamborghini, right? They just smashed your car. And now you say, what am I going to do? Right? What am I going to do over here? So he's giving you a golden opportunity. So when it comes to Yom Kippur, and someone comes to us to ask for forgiveness, now let's say this person comes to us before Yom Kippur. They want to ask us for forgiveness. What do I say? Get out of here. I'm not going to forgive you. What you did. God forbid the person was paraplegic now. He's made them into a paraplegic. Or you smash their car. They can't get anything for their car now. Car's not worth anything. Right? So whatever, all these different things. They say, no, I'm not going to accept your forgiveness. Person comes back a second time. So listen, I didn't really mean it. I should have thought better. And you say, no, scram. Now they come back a third time. They come back a third time with an entourage of people. What's the entourage of people going to do? That's going to awaken in you mercy. And if at that point you still say, scram, get out of here, you get the transgression. That person does not now have to ask for forgiveness. You get the transgression. Now, why should we be so quick to forgive someone even if it's hard? Why should we be so quick before Yom Kippur if someone asks us for forgiveness? One very simple reason. Because if we overlook what the person did against us, now everyone's going to tell me, this person cheated me, this person stole from me, this person did this to me. Why should I forgive them? It's a good point. I'm not saying that the person should get off scot-free, right? But at the same time, if I look the other way, what they did doesn't mean you have to be a dish rag. Or in Yiddish, we'd say you don't have to be a shmata. You don't have to be a dish rag over here, right? You don't have to, I know someone who actually called their dog that. It's like, they called their dog, shmata, because it looked like, like a shmata, like a dish rag. Any case, I don't want to make fun of any dogs here, but that's what the dog looked like. And in short, what should we do? We should look the other way, right? Now, that is going to be an extremely difficult thing to do because at the end of the day, person caused us damage. Now, we don't look at it in the bigger picture. Maybe we deserved it. Maybe my soul has to go through this, and all that. So why are we going to look the other way? We are going to look the other way for one very simple reason. Imagine every day, right? Every day of our lives, we do things that go against what God wants. Right? Now, you're talking about the creator of the world.
Yeah, heaven forbid.
So the creator of the world gives us air. He gives us water. He makes sure the sun's not too close. Sorry, the earth is not too close to the sun. We'd be incinerated. If it was a little bit further back, we'd look like Pluto, right? Even though Pluto got demoted as a planet, we'd be like in your neck of the woods. We'd be like Yukon territory, a frozen tundra, right? Ain't nobody lived there, right? So that being the case, that's an unbelievable thing. What about nature? Look what rain does. Imagine after the winter, rain comes, replenishes the earth, right? Allows fruit to come forth from the earth. Snow, miracle of snow, what snow does, and all these things. So we don't give thanks to that. We don't give thanks even something even more important, health, right? When do we complain? When we're sick, right? When we don't have what we normally have. Take someone who's got asthma, right? You don't even have asthma. Imagine if you had asthma and you needed an inhaler, right? If you needed an inhaler, you can't breathe, right? You need an inhaler over here. Now, what would happen? Let's say one day you don't need the inhaler. Could be every other day you do. One day you're going to say, wow, I'm breathing fine. I don't need an inhaler over here. You're going to say, wow, this is unbelievable. But then next day, go back to the inhaler, you're still complaining, right? We take health for granted. Take many, many things for granted. If we wouldn't take it for granted and we thank God and go for a walk in nature on a regular basis and thank God for the human body and how the human body works. I know somebody, it's a tragic story that they just, someone I knew in my parents' synagogue, they just finished paying off their mortgage.
Wow.
Right? They just, they were so happy they finished paying off their mortgage.
Sure. Yeah.
They're crossing the street and someone flattened them like a pancake. Right? Whatever. Wrecked his car, lost control. The person didn't die. Thank God, neither of them died. But this person said, they were broken bones and all this. But he said it was unbelievable the first time he was able to go to the bathroom by himself. He said, you don't even understand the joy. Now, we make a prayer. I shouldn't say we make a prayer. We say a prayer after we come out of the bathroom. Right? What's the prayer we say? We thank God for being able to open our orifices, right? To giving us our insides, be able to get rid of the waste, etc. And we say in the end that God is the healer, of flesh, right? And he allows us to do this. Now, what would happen? Anyone, God forbid, who's ever been constipated, even for a short amount of time, and the prune juice has not kicked in yet, you're in a lot of pain. You're in a tremendous amount of pain. Why? Because you got all these toxins inside your body, right? And if those toxins do not get out of the body, you will die, right? That's why someone if the kidneys fail and they're on dialysis, they need to be on dialysis in order to take out these things. Otherwise, for sure, a person will die.
Yep.
Right. I know someone who had a kidney transplant many years ago, more than 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and then like 25, 30 years later, their other kidney started to fail. Now this person in the mid 70s, I guess, we're not up to another transplant. They couldn't get another transplant. They're going to be on dialysis. Now, in the case of dialysis, it's extremely painful, right? You have to take like 2-3 days out of the week, whatever. It's extremely painful.
Yep.
Regardless, could have kept them alive for another 10 years. Easy, right? I shouldn't say easy, but it could have kept them alive for many years. What did they decide? They decided, I'm not going on dialysis, right? I do not want to live my life this way. Now, what is the end result? We'll play biology 101. What is it? We'll play biology 101A, right? What is the end result if you don't go on dialysis and your kidneys are failing, right? What's the end result? You will die, right? That's what's going to happen. And what happened to this person? They ate what they wanted. They did what they wanted. 2 months later, they died, right? So I asked Moiva Rebbe, I said, okay, this is a situation, right? This is a situation that's called suicide, right? We spoke about this before, right? I just want to reiterate. Is that called suicide, right? Now, we don't say it's suicide. Why not? Because they're doing something passive. They're not doing something active with Dr. Kevorkian, right? They're not shooting something inside them or pushing a button to do it, whatever. That's active, right? They're not pulling themselves off a respirator or whatever. That's active, right? That is murder. If a person, the Talmud says, a person has an opportunity to go for medicine, for whatever they need, and they say, I'm not doing it. They say, I'm not, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go through it. I don't want to extend my life anymore. I'm suffering enough as it is, right? So the conclusion is that's not called suicide. Why not? Because it's not something active. If it would be something active, that's a different story, right? Someone's asked before, what about the question of DNR, right? Person signs a thing, DNR, do not resuscitate, right? If they sign the thing that says do not resuscitate, they go into cardiac arrest. Can't touch them. If I touch them, I'm going to get sued. I'll get sued by the family, right? So what's going to happen if you don't resuscitate them? They'll probably die, right? That's probably what's going to happen, most likely. So in that case, is that called murder? It's not called murder, right? It's really not called murder. It's not something active. Now, the Talmud also learns from a case in the time of the Second Temple where the temple was being destroyed and 400 children were taken to Rome. Now, the 400 children on a boat going to Rome understood what they were going to be used for. So these 400 children said, we're not going to be abused over here. So what did they do? They all jump overboard, Yiskada, say the mourner's prayer, and so they died. Right? But the Talmud does not ask the question, no, suicide. How are they allowed to do that? How are the world allowed to do that? So one of the commentaries says that if a person's afraid they can't stand up to the suffering or whatever, in that case, they're allowed to do this. Right? In other words, they're not doing, even though they're doing it something active, they don't want to put their body through suffering or anything else they're going to go through. That they're allowed to. Right? And that's seemingly how we hold it. The problem is, when the Talmud speaks about this, is what we call a gadata. We'll teach you a little bit of Talmud, even though it's forbidden to teach non-Jews Talmud here. So we'll explain, a drop over here. What is a gadata? It's a homiletic interpretation. It's Musar, ethics, right? So the Code of Jewish Law says nothing over here. The Rambam says nothing over here, right? So I asked my Rebbe this question. So I said, in the case of suicide by this person who didn't want to get treatment for the kidney. So he says, we learn out from this piece of Talmud that you're allowed to do it if you don't want to suffer. If you want to go through suffering. I said, but it's a homiletic interpretation here. The Rambam doesn't say anything. Code of Jewish Law doesn't say anything. He says that's the law. He says that's a halach. Right? So if a person decides, God forbid, anyone should be in such a situation. But if someone, is in such a situation, they decide they don't want to go through suffering, right? That's what happens, right? They are allowed to, right? Now, they're not allowed to do something active, right? Obviously not allowed to inject themselves so they die. Not allowed to do other things, right? Again, it'll depend on, a lot of different circumstances, but in general, you get yourself hooked up to Mr. Kevorkian's machine, you push the button, right? You push the button, that's suicide, right? You do certain things, that's suicide. If you're passive, right, that's not suicide. But I want people to keep in mind that if someone is coming to ask, just, back on our case here, if someone comes to ask for forgiveness, right, almost regardless of what they've done, and it's not an easy thing by any stretch, but if they come to ask for forgiveness, shouldn't we look the other way? Why should we look the other way? We should look the other way because if we've done all these things against God on a regular basis, right, we want God to look the other way for what we've done. Because when God has to punish us, or when God is going to judge us, don't we want to have a good judgment? We want to have a good judgment, right? So it's brought down that if we look the other way of what other people did against us, right, we go beyond the letter of the law, right? Doesn't mean I have to be a masochist. Doesn't mean I have to be like a Christian and say, turn the other cheek. Like Oliver,
Suck
please,
it up.
sir, can I have another? Yeah, smack. We're not interested in that, right? But we go beyond the letter of the law because essentially we have to understand the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, if somebody did something to us, obviously at some level we deserved it. Whether we transgressed Coffman's 615th commandment, don't be a moron, right? Or something our soul actually had to go through, right? For whatever reason. Maybe the soul didn't fulfill whatever its purpose was. The soul has to go through whatever it has to go through. But everything is coming because this is what God wants from us, right? In other words, I could do something wrong. Of course, I have to be punished, right? There should be punishment unless I properly, repent. But anytime anything happens, shouldn't it be a wake-up call for me? Shouldn't it be something, we have to realize we've done something wrong? Million things we probably could have done wrong, that we deserve it. At the same time, that does not mean by any stretch, I don't want anyone to say, oh, the person did it, so I must have deserved it, he's exempt. Why is he exempt? Right? If he goes through a red light, smashes my car, smashes anybody's car, whatever. Why are they exempt? They're not exempt. Their insurance is going to have to pay if they have it. They don't have insurance, they'll pay out of pocket, right? Whatever it is, right? But they are going to be liable. We're not saying they're not liable over here. At the same time, my mentality is, according to the Torah, I have to see the bigger picture. Now, most people are going to say, the first thing they're going to do when they get out of the car, if they're healthy, nothing happens, going to scream at the other person, right? That's what we call a knee-jerk reaction. That's probably the normal reaction. Comes along the Torah and says, you're not allowed to do that, right? You always have to be thinking at all times. And you have to think steps ahead. And if you don't think steps ahead, even with thinking steps ahead, doesn't always help you. There's a story my Rabbi mentioned this week, right? In this week's parsha, he mentioned that the Brisker Rav Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik of blessed memory, one of the sons of Rabbi Chaim Brisker, who's a Torah giant of the last generation, right? Certainly according to everybody. And there was a story he told that Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, wanted to meet with him and he wanted to speak with him. And he absolutely refused, right? He absolutely refused to have anything to do with him, and he absolutely refused to speak with him. Now, what was his mentality, right? What was he thinking? He was thinking that even seeing his evil face, that in some level could have a negative effect, right? And therefore, he said, I don't want it to have a negative effect on me, either now or in the future. So he nipped it in the bud. He thought about the future, and he said, I'm not going to do this, right? And everything he did was calculated. Am I putting too much effort, into serving God? Meaning, am I not relying on him enough? Am I relying on too much? Is it a lack of emunah? Is it a lack of faith? Okay, you're talking to someone at a very high spiritual level. But one thing we have to realize, which is hard, as we mentioned before, is that whatever we go through, a lot of it depends on what we've done, right? Could be depend on what our soul has to go through, right? But we have to realize most likely it's something we've done. So a person says, come on, did I really deserve this? Did I really deserve this? Now let's think. I could give, 100,000 different scenarios, and I'm not exaggerating, all kinds of scenarios of things that we probably do wrong, one after another. Now, does that mean you're going to get severely punished for it? Depends on what you did, right? But there are going to be a number of things. Probably a lot of things we didn't even think of, that a person did that they probably deserve to be punished, right? So a person can't say, I'm guilt-free. If a person, Talmud says, sees that whatever they're going through, it has, they didn't sin, right? Let's say they didn't do anything wrong. Then it could be attributed to what we call bittul Torah. Bittul Torah means I wasted my time when I could have been learning, right? In other words, if I wasn't busy with livelihood, if I wasn't busy, with family, with other things, I had an opportunity to learn and I wasted my time, right? Something like that, God, even though God can forgive for the big three that I have an obligation to give up my life for, anytime, any place, murder, idolatry, immorality. When it comes to this, God says no. God says, I'm not looking the other way over here. Why? Because we're going to see one time in the next millennium, we're going to see that the Mishna says that if a person's learning with someone else and he says, wow, what a beautiful tree, what does the Mishna Pirkei Avos say is liable to death penalty? What do you mean? I'm praising God's creation. I'm saying how great this tree is, how great the mountains are, how great this other thing is. Why would I be liable for a death penalty? One very simple answer. And the answer is, what are you praising God's creation over here? You're supposed to be learning, right? This is taking you away from learning. Say, but I'm going to have a better appreciation, of God's creation. It's going to give me more fear of heaven, etc. No, right? When you're learning, you're supposed to be learning, right? You shouldn't be thinking about politics. Shouldn't be thinking about, how beautiful the weather is, or whatever. Right? We have to be focused on what we're doing over here. So in our case over here, that someone who has a relationship with his creator, he does more than the law requires. Right? Now, we're talking about what the law requires.
Right.
What the Chovos Levavos says is my obligation. He doesn't say this is for the pious. This is only for the righteous. He's saying it's for everybody. If he's saying it's for everybody, this isn't going beyond the letter of the law. This is the law, even though it's a hard thing to do, right? So what are we saying over here? If someone comes to us and they damaged us, we should go beyond the letter of the law to forgive them. Because really, why should I forgive them? Forget what the outlook is in the world, right? According to Judaism, according to what I think and what my heart will tell me. This person doesn't deserve forgiveness. Now, let's say that's true. Let's just say what this person did was underhanded, whatever. They don't deserve forgiveness. But if I overlook what they've done, forget whether I deserved it or not, forget the bigger picture, doesn't matter. If I overlook what they've done, then God overlooks what I've done measure for measure, right? And that's a heck of a lot worse, right? Because I'm sure the pile of sins that we've done against God is 10 times greater than what anyone's ever done against us, right? I don't think there's any question. So that being the case, if we look the other way, what we've done, what someone else has done against us, measure for measure, God says, you know what? I'm going to look the other way, right? That is the way to have a positive judgment when it comes to Yom Kippur. Now, is this easy? No, right? It's certainly not easy. Comes along the Ramchal, Rabbi Chaim Coffman, of blessed memory. The Ramchal in his epic work. You're going to think I'm going to say Derech Hashem? No, Path of the Just, right? His ethical work, Path of the Just, explains when he speaks about Hasidus, when he speaks about righteousness, piety, however you want to translate it. He's talking about someone who loves his creator in a real way. Now you're going to say, what does that mean? What it means is they don't try to exempt themselves from what they are obligated to do. In other words, maybe the way we could be lenient. We could be lenient in a certain situation, etc. And instead of being lenient, I say, no, I'm not going to rely on this, or I'm not going to rely on that. What am I going to do? I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm not going to exempt myself from what I'm obligated in. Maybe I could, right? Maybe there's a way I should do that. But who says I should do that? Right? Even though I have a way out, if they're serving, this is the language here, if they're serving God in the proper way,
right,
in the quote unquote, the real way, they're not looking for shortcuts. They're not looking to exempt themselves from what they're obligated to do. So it's a parable. What's the parable? It's like a son who loves his father, that even if the father reveals a little bit what he wants the son to do, what's the son going to do? What's the child going to do? He's going to go out of his way to make sure his father gets what he needs plus. Right? Because that child wants to fulfill the will of his father. Now, again, the father only asked for something, whatever, even if it's something minor, whatever it is. But the person's going to fulfill it in such a way that he'll go out of the way, to do what he wants, and he'll go beyond what his obligation is to do. Right? In other words, father asks him, make it easy. Father asks him, son, daughter, can you get me a cup of water? Can you get me a glass of water? So what do? Not only get him a glass of water, right? They put ice in the water because it's nice and warm. They put ice in the water. Get him a piece of fruit. Get him something else that the father likes. And bring this whole tray. Now, the father only asked for a cup of water. You could have just got it from the tap, and that's it. Give him a cup of water. Dad, here. And you put it down. Right? But here, what did he do? He beautified the mitzvah. Not only did he give him water, he gave it with ice, maybe with lemon, right? With some bitters in it, maybe. I don't know. It's the way the father likes it, and maybe gave him something else. Dad, can I get you anything else? That's going beyond, right? In other words, if the child wants to help the father, right? Wants to do what the father says, but goes well beyond what the father asks. That's what we're talking about here. Because God is a father to us, right? We look at God as a father. We're children of him, so to speak. So therefore, what he wants us to do, not only we should beautify every mitzvah, meaning whatever mitzvah we do, we should do it in the best way possible, right? If you're going to buy, if a Jew, for Sukkot, is going to buy a lulav, an esrog, willows, and myrtle leaves, they should, I'm not saying they spend all their money, all their money they have, but they should, they should beautify the mitzvah according to their means. This was the mistake.
According to their means.
According to their means. This is the mistake that Cain made, because he saw Abel gave from the best of his flocks, and he saw that God sort of sucked up the sacrifice, and he saw the sacrifice was accepted, and his sacrifice wasn't. Right, he understood he had to bring a sacrifice. But what did he do? So in my language, he brings God dandelions. Right, he brought God some flax. So God frowned upon it. And he understood this and he got mad. Right, he ends up killing Abel. And God tries to cajole him over here, trying to get him to repent. Right, first time we see repentance, right, in the world. So he tries to get Cain to repent. But the irony is he understood to bring a sacrifice. The problem was he brought him dandelions. Then the 3-year-old, takes a bunch of dandelions, puts it in the cup with dirt, gives it to his mother. Mother's so happy. She'll put it on the windowsill. She'll tell all her friends, look, my 3-year-old brought me flowers. All right, they're dandelions. They're weeds, right? So even if they're weeds, look what my son brought me, look what my daughter brought me, unbelievable. Okay, at their level. But if you know better, and this son is 8, 9, 10, 15, whatever it is, says, Mom, here, look, I brought you flowers, right? And she brings us half droopy flowers that are weeds. It's like, Mom, I did it for you. Now, if they're mentally challenged, we don't have a question. If they have half a brain, the mother should take the flowers and throw them at them. Like, this is what you bring me? You brought me a bunch of dandelions. Now, didn't Cain understand that? How did Cain not understand? He understood to bring a sacrifice. How did he not understand to bring the best? Right? So now, there's a little bit of Cain in all of us. Why? Yeah, we do the mitzvahs, right? Jews, we go through the motions, which is, going through the motions is akin to spiritual death, right? The thing that actually my Rebbe brought down in this week's parsha talks about when Aaron brings, he's lighting the menorah, right? In the praise that the Torah says is when he lit the menorah, he didn't change. He didn't change his mentality. In other words, the first day he lit the menorah, he's all excited. In the second day he lit the menorah, he was just as excited. In the third day he lit the menorah, he was just as excited. Every time he did the mitzvah, right, he had the same excitement. He never drooped, right? He never went below this. So, question is, okay, very good. So what's the praise? So what? He did it, at a certain level every single time because he didn't do it by rote, right? That is the point. He didn't just go through the motions. He was excited every time he did it like it was the first time. So somebody was saying, woe to us if we go through the motions in whatever we do. When it comes to prayer is a whole different thing. Prayer is a hard thing to get into. It's one of the things that always needs to be strengthened, right? Prayer, all the mitzvahs, right? In general, some things we get more excited about. Imagine, when it comes to Hanukkah, lighting the candles, get excited about that because only once a year, right? Eating, 8 days, eating matzah, sitting in a sukkah, etc. But what about the things we do day in and day out, right? We make blessings. We keep Shabbat. We keep other mitzvahs, whatever it is. So why aren't we walking around all excited by what we do? Because again, life in general beats us down. We don't look at every mitzvah like it's new. Because there's a paragraph before we say the Shema. Every day we say in the morning that God is Machadesh B'chol Yom Tamid. Machadesh B'chol Yom Tamid means God renews. The word Machadesh means to make anew. But the language, the grammar is Piyel. What does Piyel mean? It's active. It's active, not past tense. I would think, God renewed. Say it in past tense. God renewed creation. What do you mean renewed? What do you mean yesterday? What about today? If God, for a split second sneezes and he forgets about creation, for one split second, the world goes back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Right? Goes back to that original chaos. Kind of like the back of that Led Zeppelin album. Right? If you know what I'm talking about. Chaos! Right? If God takes his mind off for 1 second. So God renews creation every day. Right? So we are a new creation every day. So when we wake up in the morning, it's one of the reasons we have to wash our hands. Because we have these, I guess in my language, we'll call it spiritual cooties. You got these spiritual cooties on your hands. You have to wash them. What's one reason? Because our soul went up. God gives us a soul back. We're like a new creation. Right? We're reborn again. But again, the language is mechadesh. Right? It's active form. It's not past tense. God renews creation on a daily basis. Because guess what? If he didn't, you wouldn't have to listen to me. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have to say anything about the CFL. That wouldn't exist. None of it would exist ever, as we would say in Boston. Ever, right? So none of this would exist. So therefore, God cannot take his mind off for 1 second. How can we take our minds off of what the goodness of God does for us on a daily basis? Right? In other words, how can we lose track? How can we lose sight of reality? What's the answer? Very simple answer. The answer is we have an evil inclination. Right? God gave us an evil inclination, and if it wouldn't be the fact that God helps us overcome it, we'd never be able to overcome it. Ever. Right? So God, what's the antidote? Torah. The antidote is Torah. So a person is entrenched in his evil inclination. One way out of it is you take the evil inclination to the study hall. You learn Torah. Right? If that doesn't work, you say the Shema. Right? You say the Shema, meaning, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you're going to take on the yoke of heaven. Then you're going to take on the yoke of mitzvahs. right? That'll put you in a certain frame of mind. If that doesn't work, what's the last hope? What's the last line of defense? The last line of defense is think about the day of your death. Now, that's pretty darn depressing, right? So the commentaries ask, okay, why don't we think about that first? In other words, if a person knows they got 30 seconds to live, and they know they're going in front of the King of Kings, they're probably going to be scared out of their minds. What are they going to answer? What are they going to say? They have to have tshuva on their lips, right? Repentance on their lips, right? And all that. But a person can't think of the day of their death every second of every day, right? That'll make them totally depressed, right? No question about it. So we do other things. We think about Torah. We think about the importance of learning Torah, the power of learning Torah, because when a person learns, they're in another world, right? They're thinking of our connection, to the Creator, how we relate to Him, how we relate to others, right? How it's supposed to affect us, right? Torah is supposed to change us. It's not like some people might think. It's not a 5-year option to renew, right? We got an obligation to keep it to the best of our ability, and therefore it always has to be on our minds. What I'm saying, what I'm doing, how I'm acting, right? And you're going to say, well, that's kind of hard, 24/7. Think about all this, right? It is, but that's our obligation. Doesn't mean it has to be all doom and gloom over here. We have to serve God with great joy, but again, we get beaten down in life. So even though what I'm saying is not new, and this is what the Ramchal says in Path of the Just, if you read his introduction, the Ramchal says, I'm not teaching you anything new. Everything you're learning is, stuff that's obvious. I'm just telling you things that are obvious. Interesting enough, the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago, said in that book, the Ramchal, in that book of the Ramchal and Path of the Just, not one extra word. He said, not one extra word. Right? You have to understand who the Vilna Gaon was, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, without going into all that. He's telling you a fundamental principle. Right? He's telling you a fundamental principle. What I'm saying is not new. So he said, I'm just reminding you of things you already know. So, a lot of these things, you look at Pirkei Avos in general, right? We've been doing for the last, 8 months, year, more, right? Even though we haven't got that far. Probably won't get far in the future.
I think this is our 65th recording, so.
Wow, this is pretty impressive because I'm almost up to 100 in Tanakh Talk. I'm at like 92 or something, 93 also. It's
wow.
It's unbelievable. I had somebody here last week or a few weeks ago, and my my conversion classes, I've given now, I just sent out Friday, my 1,349th class, 48th class. Now, it only means I have like 125, 130, my repertoire. I've been doing it over 12 years. He's like, you've given 1,300 classes? I said, that's not the question. People have actually listened to 1,300 classes. In the Torah Ports of the Week, I'm at like, 223 or 222. I forget, 223, 222, 224. Whatever it is, the numbers just go, the numbers just go up. It's just, it's pretty amazing. But, a person has to realize as well that God gave us an antidote. Right? The antidote to the evil inclination is Torah. But Torah is not enough. Because the Talmud says you need heavenly help. Torah helps. Right? Torah definitely helps. But without God's help, it's very hard. But the point is, if we're really into Torah, if we're really into learning, I guess more of my Hasidic side are coming out. If we really want to sing and dance and really get into things, why in the world is the person ever going to sin? Right? Well, as the Talmud says, how does a person sin? Because Talmud says, Nichnas bo ruach shtus. It entered in him a foreign, a stupid thought, right? A stupid spirit, right? Let's say. Because if a person really understands, right? As we've spoken about the Chovos Levavos, if a person really understands what we're doing here, what God wants from us, right? And all that, if we really understood the bigger picture, isn't it true that a person should never come to sin? Rav Shulei Diskin, was former rabbi of Jerusalem,
should be effective, yeah.
More than 100 years ago. He said, I don't understand how it can be anybody can sin. The fact that the Torah tells me there are evil people that exist in the world, that's the only way I can understand it. Right? In other words, we have such awesome responsibility.
There's depth there.
Even though we have such an awesome responsibility for what God wants from us and all that, how could you ever go against it? How could you ever sin against, the one who gave you life? So if Rabbi Shmuel Leib Diskin was sitting right here, right, and he would say that, and he would be, he would be in Pirkei Avos, and he would say this, what would we answer? We'd say, no offense to Rabbi Diskin, what would we say? What about our evil inclination? What about everyday life that we get thrown around? With all kinds of different things, whether it's health, whether it's livelihood, whether it's both, whether it's family, there are a million things. We get thrown around, etc. So my answer would be very simple. You're right. If we lived that way and we thought that way on a regular basis, then that would very much be true, except we have an evil inclination, right? And the evil inclination makes it a lot more difficult. So Rabbi Diskin would say, okay, but, I also have an evil inclination, but my head's screwed on tight enough. You have to work out ways to fight it. You can't just say, well, this is the way it is. This is my evil inclination. I can't fight it. This is who I am, etc. Because if a person that says that, right, or acts on that, they're like silly putty. They're absolutely like silly putty, for the evil inclination. Or I guess in my language, you probably may remember this, something called shrinky dinks. You remember shrinky dinks? Put them in the oven, right? They get fluffy, whatever, right? Shrinky, we are silly putty for the evil inclination, right? Now, the evil inclination in every generation is different, right? There are certain evil inclination in every generation, right? 150 years ago, 200 years ago, it was all about socialism, communism, democracy, and all that. Today it's all based on desire, but today what's the, I guess, highest level, I would say, or the most common level of the evil inclination today, and that is none other, and we spoke about it, I think, last week, and that is none other than technology, right? Technology is the evil inclination of the day. Why? Because a person can see anything or watch anything, it's something that's in your hand. It used to be you wanted to see some sordid things. You had to go to a movie theater. You had to go late at night. You had to do certain things. You don't have to do that. Say it's very easy. I don't need a wide screen. Yeah, one second. I don't need a wide screen. All I need is a handheld device, right? And once I have that handheld device, that is, that's the war. That is the war that we're fighting today. And the evil inclination has it so easy because, what are people doing? I see all the time, whether I should be on social media or not, it's a good question. But I see all the time, oh, this person's playing Candy Crush. Oh, this person's watching, is doing this. This person's doing that. So it's a waste of life over here. I mean, you could buy life, right? In Candy Crush, you can actually, buy it, but people are spending way, way too much time, watching these things, playing these things. And when I grew up, for goodness sakes, they had Pong. I started with Pong.
Ding.
Then they had Atari with these little figures. Then they had Intellivision, right? Then they had Intellivision. That was like 10 steps up, from Atari. But video games have obviously gone to a whole different
ColecoVision.
Had to go into a whole different, level, and this was well before the Xbox, right? You had Asteroids, you had Donkey Kong, you had Pac-Man, you had Miss Pac-Man. I mean, but going to, video arcades, people had a lot of fun, okay, wasting money as well, but, people had fun. You played pool, you did this, played arcade games.
Pinball.
Today's it's at a whole different level, right? It's a whole different level, and it's addicting, and they make it addicting, and it makes perfect sense, but at the same time,
online gambling.
At the same time, everyone's got all this free time. They got all this free time to watch this stuff, to play this stuff, etc. And the Chofetz Chaim, someone once told him, time is money, right? In America they say, and all over the world they say, time is money. But Chofetz Chaim said, no, I beg to differ. He said, time is life. He said, time is life. And he said, a person's going to be shocked out of their gourd after 120 years. A person said, I didn't have time to study. Oh, yeah, you had 3,500,227.5 hours of wasted video time, arcade time, and all these things. And we mentioned before, God can look past the big three: idolatry, murder, and immorality. But if a person had an opportunity to learn God's wisdom and you were too busy playing a video game, God does not look the other way on that. Yeah, you had a question before.
Well, I mean, just trying to be, say, sympathetic a little bit, but I spent a number of years working with addicts and things of this nature. And the point being, when you're dealing with the evil inclination, I found with addicts, and I was actually taught this by a really strong addict, okay? I mean, the approaches nowadays are more medical, try to actually help them cope with and change their lives. I mean, places like Portugal, who have pulled away and legalized all kinds of drugs, it's actually brought down the addiction rate. And what this one addict had said is explained the difference between an addict and an abuser. Okay.
Yeah.
And an abuser, they're not just that person that needs it. They want to go hard in that evil inclination. And I find that when you're dealing with somebody who is a sinner, if you want to call them that, if you want to say they're engrossed with the evil inclination, there's this bloodthirsty, almost like abusive nature that's different than being addicted to it, because I find teshuva works.
It's a different level. Listen, someone who's a gambler, right? How do they get rehabilitated when they lose everything? Someone who's an alcoholic, a drug addict, right?
Yeah,
a
hit
drug
rock
abuse.
bottom, sure.
Right, they have to hit rock bottom. They absolutely have to hit rock bottom. Now, can someone be an addict and not hit rock bottom? Now, there are different levels, right? There are different levels. There'd be someone where they wake up and they have to be online. They have to check. There are people that have to check their email every 35 seconds. If they hear a beep on their phone, I missed something.
Well, they're addicted to dopamine.
They need the news every 10 minutes to hear the same news over and over again, or they're just on all these websites, to see what's going on, right? That's beyond. That's not just saying, okay, what's going on in the world today? What's going on in the news? That's beyond, right? Who in the world has to look every 5 seconds? Who, I missed an email. Now, there is something where, let's say it's a business contact or whatever, someone sends you an email, you want to answer straight away, right? You want to see like, oh, you're on top of things, this, that, that I hear, that I can possibly hear, to have that close connection, you respond straight away, because there's nothing more obnoxious that gets someone upset where, you send someone an email or a text, they don't answer you. Unless like something happened and they're busy or whatever, they're really busy, like 3 hours later, they finally answer you. Or like 2 days later, they finally answer you. They don't think anything of it. That wasn't that important. It was this. But we get caught up in all this, right? 100% we get caught up in all this. And, it's, even if you're going to tell me that places where they legalize, like in the States, a lot of places legalize marijuana, right? Not just for medicine.
Yeah.
So, you want to tell me, okay, you legalize it and the numbers go down. So let's get to what the Torah says here, right? First of all, using any type of drugs is forbidden, right? It doesn't matter. You have an obligation to guard your body. So using, some things are worse than others, etc. But a person has to remember one thing. King Solomon says, Ma'im genuvim imtaku. What does Ma'im genuvim imtaku mean? It means that stolen waters are always sweeter, right? If a person has an extramarital affair, right? Why is it exciting? Why is it so exciting? It's so exciting because it's something you can't have, right? It's something that is forbidden. If it's allowed, it's not that exciting, right? Let's say someone divorces their spouse, God forbid, marries their mistress, not the same, right? It's not that relationship now, is it going to be exciting as it was before? Probably not, right? You have to make it more exciting, but, why is it not as exciting? because now it's permitted to me, right? Once something is permitted to me, that's one thing. But now you say I can't do it, that makes the thrill much greater. If it makes the thrill much greater, then it's running, it's the chase. It's trying to do it in a legal way, right? Like some people underage, want to get other people to buy them alcohol, right? So they can drink. Why do they want to drink? Because they're not allowed to, right? Doesn't matter. They like the taste. They like the feeling. They like the buzz. They like, it doesn't really matter. But the fact that they say it's forbidden, right? Forbidden waters is sweeter. It tastes much better because it's forbidden. Now I have the opportunity to, have it. Now, person hits 21, are they going to go clubbing and bar hopping and all this, for such a long time? For a little bit of time, because now they're legal. Okay, very good. But that's going to wear off. Why is it going to wear off? Because it's already permitted. I don't have to get a fake ID. I don't have to try and fight my way in. I don't have to do any of these other things. Once I know it's forbidden, then if I do it in an underhanded way, however it's done, that's a heck of a lot more sweet. Right? So I can understand. It makes perfect sense according to this. That,
beautiful.
I'm not saying it should be done, right? But I'm just saying it makes sense why the numbers should be done, because now you're going to tell me it's permissible, and it's allowed according to the law.
Beautiful.
So what's the big deal? It's not enjoyable. It's not as enjoyable. Does that mean, so where do you draw the line? So you're going to say it's only by marijuana. People don't get so addicted to marijuana. It can have negative effects. Harder drugs are much worse, right? Certainly alcohol in certain ways may be much worse. But everyone will say, if a person uses, marijuana for a long time, it destroys brain cells. Alcohol, same thing. It destroys your liver also, right? Your kidneys also. Still, the fact is that if it's something, it's not hardcore, so to speak, doesn't mean you should do it. Right. And, even if the numbers go down, I think that's one of the reasons. Could be wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons.
No, it's a very valid point, Rabbi.
I think that's one of the reasons that the numbers would go down, because it's not exciting anymore. Hard drugs are a different issue, right? And that's, hopefully, they'll never make legal, because that has, really serious side effects.
Death.
Right.
Yeah.
Even at a small level.
Yeah.
Right. So, so we mentioned over here, so with the evil inclination, that's what we're talking about, right? So the evil inclination over here is a very hard thing to fight. Now, even though Rabbi Shulei Diskin may agree, and he said, okay, we have the Torah to fight it, etc. But you see, you have to make the heart and the mind connect. There's always disconnect. You have to make them connect. First of all, you have to understand, which is not so easy, which most people have never heard of up until this point, and that will be what God wants from us, what our purpose is in the world, to draw close to Him. Because if I do something that goes in the opposite direction, that goes far away from God, doesn't want me to do, I take 3 steps backwards. Now, if I take 3 steps backwards, that means I have to take at least 3 steps forward, and a little bit further in order for me to be in the plus side. But if I keep taking steps backwards, it's much harder to go forward. Because the more we do things, the evil inclination comes in. And the more we do it, it becomes part of us. Once it becomes part of us, right, it's almost impossible to fight against. Right? Not impossible. What we saw before. We spoke about someone who has thoughts. Whatever the thoughts are, once a person thinks something, it's part of the psyche. Unless you work very hard to get rid of it. So Torah can do that. The problem is, we absolutely have to understand the bigger picture. And if we understand the bigger picture, then we have to live our lives in a way where these other things do not bother us. That they're not going to have any effect. Let's say better. That they're not going to have any effect on us. Because if we allow it to have an effect, we allow it to entrench inside of us. Even though Adam said, if I overcome it, what's going to happen? Then exponentially, my soul is going to go up, right? I'm going to raise myself to a higher spiritual level exponentially. Only problem is, if I do the wrong thing, it's going to take me down exponentially as well. Right? And God understood that. And that's exactly why God said, don't eat from the tree. Even though we could reach higher spiritual levels in a much quicker amount of time. God didn't disagree. The problem is, I created the world for that. I absolutely did not create the world for that. He calls Adam a heretic because he went against what he said, even though he may agree to the premise. Right? The premise makes sense. The only problem is you have a lot more to lose than you have to gain. Right? Now, when we speak about technology, right? Anyone who's listening now is obviously on some sort of device, right? Computer, phone, whatever it is. And someone will say, listen, if it wouldn't be for YouTube, for this great thing called YouTube, I'd never see any of these videos. I would never come in contact with Torah. I never would have learned any of this stuff otherwise, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to say there's not good Torah, that's on the internet. There's a lot of bad Torah. You have good and bad. There's a lot of bad also, right? But forget about Torah. If you were to ask most people, right, most honest people. Now, there are not too many of them, but let's say you get someone that's intellectually honest, right? And you were to ask them, on the internet itself, are there better things on the internet that a person can learn from in a positive way or negative? Now, the answer overwhelmingly, unless the person is brain dead. No offense to anyone who's brain dead, but the overwhelming answer is there's a heck of a lot worse things out there than good. Yeah, you can say I look at a news site, it's not so bad. I look up this, not so bad, right? But everybody knows unless you have a pop-up blocker, and the pop-up blocker does not block everything, right? You could be looking at something innocent and something comes up.
Oh, it's like going in the ocean and trying not to get wet.
And it does it all the time, right? Yeah. I'm not living in Victorian England, right? I got my feet planted right on the ground. Even with the best of pop-up blockers, it doesn't block everything, right? Even with the best of things, unless you whitelist, you can only go on certain things, right? You go on YouTube, there are plenty of things, right? There are plenty of things you don't want to see there, in general. Now, is there a good amount of Torah? Yes. That's definitely true. So I said, well, if I have to be on the internet anyway, so it's not so bad. Okay, that's a little bit of a stretch, right? But there's a heck of a lot worse things out there. It doesn't have to be, things that are outrightly forbidden, right? It doesn't have to be immorality, per se. People just like to watch, news things. People into sports, people into movie, whatever. Even if these things are not at the outset necessarily forbidden, except for wasting time. The problem is you feed that desire. It's enjoyable. No one's going to say watching a good movie is not enjoyable. No one's going to say watching old Star Trek, right? Three Stooges, right? It was just funny. I was telling one of my kids was here for Shabbos, so is my son-in-law, one of my son-in-law's parents, whatever, live in the neighborhood. So we went to see them, went to see his grandparents were there. And so, I was talking about this driving course, different things. One of the things was, about reaction time. What's the average reaction time? I'm sure everyone wants to know this. What's the average reaction time if you're going like 30 kamash? What's kamash? Kilometers per second, right? Kilometers per hour, whatever it is, right? We would say, what do you call it? Mile, like how fast you're going, right? Miles per hour or kilometers. So here in Israel, they call it kamash, right? Kilometers per hour, whatever it is. So if you're going 30 kilometers an hour, right? For anyone who's in the metric system, right? You're going, let's say 15 miles per hour, right? So we see this video, guys driving in a residential area, parked cars all over the place. All of a sudden, a kid runs out chasing after a ball, and you hear the brakes screech. Right, so now we see a grid, and we see a grid of if a person's going faster, or the average speed, what your reaction time is, right? The reaction time normally is 3/4 of a second, right? If you're under the influence or whatever, obviously if you're going faster, it's longer,
sleepy,
etc. So one of the instructors, okay, so what happens in this scenario, right? The guy puts on the brakes. I said, kid's dead. That's the scenario.
We shouldn't be laughing at such.
Driving that fast, he probably could have stopped. Maybe he just blew up the ball. Maybe he knocked off the kid and his glasses stayed on. He got 350 points. I don't know, right? But that was whatever the whole thing, right? So I mentioned. So why do I bring this up? Because there's because I was so I was there last night. My son-in-law's parents. So I said, yeah, it reminded me of this old. This old Three Stooges joke. What was that? He said, go faster. I said, I can't. He goes, why not? I said, I can't find the clutch. And then Curly pulls out the clutch. It's like, oh, I got the clutch right here. And they see like they're just going around. Right. But anyway, it's a side point. But the whatever, it's just, it's ironic. It's ironic. Like, you take this course, obviously it's for younger drivers. Right. But nobody drives like the book. Fine. Even if people know how to drive. There are a lot of things about the law they don't know, right? Now, we should be safe drivers and all that. That is all true. But, at the same time, a person needs to get somewhere and, et cetera. Where do most accidents happen? 10 minutes from your house. Why 10 minutes from your house? Because you know the area like the back of your hand. So, you know all the shortcuts, this, that. So, you drive fast, you drive a little more recklessly because you know the area. If it's somewhere you need to be. And Waze is taking you, right? So you're going a lot slower because you have no idea where you're going, right? So, what's the parable over here? We have to use Waze, so to speak, at the Torah as Waze as our navigation, right? Now, using it as navigation and understanding our purpose in the world, understanding what we're doing here, understanding all the chesed, all the acts of loving kindness that God does, right? So comes along Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin. And Rabbi Shua Leib Diskin says, with all that, I don't care about the evil inclination. I don't care what goes on in the world. With all that, how is that not put into your heart? How is a person not living that on a daily basis, and forget about the evil inclination. Forget about all these other extraneous things. All that doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because I'm focused. What happens when I'm not focused? So it's brought down that when a person has a lapse, they have a mind lapse. What do I mean? A person can only sin when their mind is not fixed in Torah. Right? In other words, if they're thinking about other things, then other things in their mind. Just like the Arizal of Rabbi Gloria, blessed memory, says if a person's praying, right, especially the Shmon Esrei, the 19 blessings, there are a lot of blessings there about our livelihood, about health, but all kinds of things. How can a person get distracted? You're standing in front of a king. How in the world do you get distracted? You're thinking about livelihood, and then you're thinking about, oh, I got this to do. I got that to do. I have to run out here. I have to do, why is your mind distracted over here? Okay, I understand it's 19 blessings. Right, but in prayer in general, we get distracted. Something which we mentioned always needs to be strengthened. But the point is, says Rabbi Zakuria, how could you get distracted? How in the world can you get distracted? You're standing in front of the king, right? If you were in front of a head of state, are you going to sit there and be playing on your phone? Are you going to be sitting there thinking extraneous things? Your mind is focused on what's going on right now. You're tuned in. You are 100% focused. What about the King of Kings? Right? We don't have real kingship today in general, right? But what about the King of Kings? Says Rabbi Zakuria, fundamental principle. Fundamental principle is if a person's already opened themselves up to sin, if they've already sinned, right? They've done something on purpose or whatever, then their mind can be distracted. If a person wouldn't sin and really be focused, then, you wouldn't get distracted. But the fact is, if we've done something wrong, or we've done many things wrong, doesn't really matter. We've opened ourselves up. Once we've opened ourselves up, it doesn't even matter if we're standing in front of the King of Kings. Right? Now, a person would say, come on, I have to have that focus. Right? And forget about ADHD. Right? A normal person. Prayer is a hard thing. I get it. We get distracted. We lose focus. We're not into it. I understand even if the prayer service is 15 minutes, like the afternoon service, like the evening service. I'm not even talking about the morning service. No, talking about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. You go on for hours. It's very easy to get distracted, but why do we get distracted? Why in the world do we get distracted? So the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, now I'll quote Derech Hashem, the Ramchal says over there, you know what? God put us in this world to reach a minimal level in order to have a portion of the world to come. He said, but you have to be in this world. This is a world that you have to strive, that you have to struggle, that you end up making mistakes, right? That you're forced to do things in a physical way, right? If Adam and Eve ate from the tree, what's one of the curses? You're gonna have to eat from the fruit of your hands, right? You're gonna have difficulty making a living. That's part of the punishment. So we're too busy chasing our tails. We're doing other things, but we get distracted. So a person get upstairs after 120 years, and God's gonna say, "So what about Torah?" So what do you mean? I got distracted. I understand absolute truth now, right? Now I see it, but what do you want from me? I got distracted. God says, "Didn't you read the Ramchal? Then you know. Of course you're gonna get distracted. I made these distractions, right? I created the evil inclination. Adam wanted inside of you. Okay, made it more difficult. Fine, right? But I put this there for you to struggle, for you to work hard. I didn't say it was going to be easy, not by any stretch,
your brow, yeah.
right? But you have to get to a certain level, right? You have to hit a minimal level. But I put it, God says, I created the world, you dimwit. My word. You dimwit. Of course I put it there, right? So now I say, well, it's a stumbling block. Well, who said it's supposed to be a stumbling block? Why aren't you focused? Why are you worried about the NBA playoffs? Why are you worried about these other things that don't matter? Right? I was once very much into Israeli politics many years ago. And my Rebbe beat me. I can't even tell you how many times he kept saying, forget about this. Doesn't matter. All these people running, they're all bad. Some are worse than others. They're all bad. It doesn't matter. Who's in power, who's not in power, what they should do, they shouldn't do, who's joining together, who cares? He says, your obligation is sit and learn. Because 95% of the time he asked me, he said, are you happy 95% of the way God runs the world? I was like, yeah, I guess so. And he goes, the other 5% you don't understand? You understand in 10 lifetimes. But your obligation is to learn. Your obligation is to put fear of God in you and your family. Give that over to others. That's your job. This other stuff is a distraction. But it's a fun distraction, right?
Oh.
Just like the Argonauts. It's a fun distraction. Come on. 1984 when the Celtics beat LA, right? The Celtics beat the LA Lakers. And we're screaming in the Boston Garden, beat LA. It's a stupid thing.
Magic Johnson.
But I made my father, when I was 16 years old, I made my father take me to the game. 7th game.
Wow.
Saw him win the championship, right? We had season tickets for years.
Larry Bird,
does that make me a
Robert
better person?
Parrish, I remember it.
Yeah, does that make me a better person? Absolutely not, right? But it's fun, right? Get to see a whole parade, right? The whole thing, whatever, all these different things. I'm not saying it's not enjoyable, right? And if if a person grew up in Boston, the winningest, city, in the last 20 years, nothing to talk about by the Patriots, the Celtics, the Bruins, even the Red Sox won World Series and all that. It's unbelievable when you think about it, because, other cities don't win anything. Cleveland, what have they ever done? Nothing. Okay, at least the Cubs won a World Series, but all these other things, Pittsburgh Pirates, they've done anything since 1979? Willie Stargell? No, they haven't done anything, right? But who cares, right? It's a fun distraction. Right. It's a fun distraction. But what does it do? What does it do? Gives us bad character traits. We hear people cursing, doing all kinds of terrible things. We follow this like the word of God. We see what goes on in the off season, right? If you want to see how many, NFL players going to get new contracts, got to see what's going to happen in the off season. People killing people, being in bars, drama. Other things, for that big payday, they get killed, right? Almost literally, so you're going to say, I don't care. I don't really follow. I don't care what they do in in their lives. All this doesn't matter, but we get caught up. We get caught up in fantasy. At the end of the day, a person get all caught up, let's say in a movie. They all get caught up and the person dies. Person gets shot. Said, I can't believe they killed him.
And they cry.
Yeah, right. People get so into it and they get so moved.
Titanic.
He died. He said, he didn't. He's probably in a bar right now getting plastered. He's probably doing all these other. He's still alive. He didn't die. But we get caught up. We get caught up in the fantasy, right? And unfortunately, we've done it to ourselves. Again, once a person brings that in, and we've spoken about this a number of times, it's good to repeat. Once a person puts this in their lives at any level, then learning Torah and everything else goes out the window. It's not as exciting. Playing these high sophisticated video games, and trying to learn a Mishna and Pirkei Avos, what would you rather do? Oh, come on, Rabbi, I love listening to you. Listening to Pirkei Avos is better than a video game. Halavai. Halavai. But we live in a world of fantasy. Talmud tells us one of the rabbis went up to heaven. They asked him when he came back. They said, what did you see? What did you see? He said, I saw an upside down world. The people that are suffering in this world, they're looking very good in the next world. People that have it easy in this world, let's just say they don't smell so good up there. Right? So we're living in an upside down world. What we see, we don't understand. But even with all that, we would say to Rabbi Shulei Diskin, no offense, this is a world of distraction. And he would scream at us and say, why are you getting distracted? Right? The only reason a person has the ability to get distracted is because you're not learning right now. Because your head is not full of Torah. In other words, if your head is free and your mind is free, that means that you are more susceptible to sin. Right? You have too much free time. People say, I don't have any free time. I'm so busy. Right. Again, let's break down a person's day. Even if a person's busy from the time they get up 6:30 in the morning, let's say, they go to sleep at, 10:30, 11, 11:30 at night. So I'm so busy, I don't have a chance to breathe during the day. Okay, how many videos did you watch? How many emails did you send? How many news things did you want? These add up. Oh, but I don't have any free time. What do you mean? You don't have free time to learn, but you have free time to do this. No, that's only a second here, a minute here. There was one great rabbi, I forget who it was, that every year he would finish the entire Talmud. One year he was so ecstatic. He made, such a lavish thing. He was more excited than any other year. So they asked him why. So he said, when I finished the Talmud, when I finished this round of learning the Talmud, when I was waiting for buses. When I was waiting for a bus, I would take out my pocket Talmud and I would learn. And when I was on the bus, now people get, car sick, okay, right? But he was able to learn even on the bus. So he said, when I was waiting around, at times I was waiting at a wedding, I was waiting at this, waiting at that. In the times that I was waiting for different things to happen, that's when I finished it. Learned a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit over there, right? And I ended up covering ground, and I ended up finishing it that way. Yeah, you had a question before?
Well, okay. Now, bear with me, Rabbi. I may need a couple of minutes to throw this out there because you've hit a nerve with me that I need answers on, Rabbi. I really do need answers on this because this show, I like the new look. I've spent a lot of time. You talked earlier about trying to make something beautiful with the flowers. Are you giving the wilted dandelions? Or are you actually doing something? But then again, too, I spend a lot of time to put stuff together. Like I originally designed this for another rabbi who passed on. The point being, we know the attractiveness of video games and things of that. And my angle has always been to try to beautify what you folks do so that it is marketable, not marketables per se in the sense of marketing, but so that it's got that attractive draw there. I know that Torah, the effectiveness is hidden in the depths of what you can and can't share with us. No.
So let's say like this. Let's say a person has something they have to raise money for. Let's say yeshiva, a girls' school, whatever, and they hire somebody, or someone else does, whoever it is, someone who knows graphics, right? Someone who's a graphic artist, right? They put together a brochure, right? Now, let's say the person himself could do it himself. He's qualified to do it. So in order to save money, instead of sending it out, he does it himself, right? He does it himself. Now, he puts a great package together. It took him hours, right? It took him hours to do it. Probably could have been learning,
saved $100. Yeah, and spent 100 hours.
Whatever, he did it himself. Right, he did it himself. Is God gonna look at it like he should have learned Torah anyway and just passed it on to someone else and paid the money? Or the fact that he did it himself, he beautified it in his own way, and that's what got people to donate. That's not a waste of time, right? That's not considered a waste of time. Someone sort of misinterpreted what I said about I made a video and I called it not sipping pina coladas, right? Or don't sip pina coladas, right? The context was
I heard
that Yaakov Avinu, that our father Yaakov, that all he wanted to do was sit and learn. He didn't want to be, He didn't want to, he was had problems with his brother, right? He had problems with, Dinah. He had problems with Lavan, right? He had all these issues. All he wanted to do was just be left alone, to be able to sit and learn Torah. So what happened? So Rashi says, God got upset, and it was a whole story with Joseph, right? Joseph and the brothers, right? And that brought Yaakov down to Egypt, and and all that. So whatever. I mentioned this video that, what do you think? Yaakov wanted to sit back and just relax, kick his feet up and sip pina coladas. There are times that, a person has to make a living. When they're not making a living, they have an obligation to learn, unless they have other family obligations. Now, when it comes to family obligations, right, a woman has to be willing to send her husband out to learn, if, has to have fixed times to learn, even if it's hard on her, but he has to learn at some point, right? In other words, that's his olam haba. The only reason he's allowed to work is the fact he has to put bread on the table. If he's not working, he's got to be learning, right? Now, what about, his wife's got a whole bunch of little kids, she's having it hard. Okay, he has to help out as well. But at the same time, she's got to send him to learn, right? So there are times where, even if it's hard on somebody, they have to go out and learn, even if it's hard on the spouse. At the same time, there are familial obligations. That doesn't mean every second of every day I'm going to be learning and I say, say goodbye to the family, right? Now, unfortunately, there are great rabbis that, were so dedicated to their students and learning, whatever, they neglected their families, right? And a number of them said on themselves that they regret what they did because, some of their kids didn't come out exactly, the way they wanted, but there was neglect, right? So you say, well, wait a minute, didn't they have a higher obligation? They had yeshiva, people needed them, ask questions night and day. Well, so what about family? Families chop liver? Family, classes are important, right? There's no question, but family's more important, right? Family's even more important, so, if that's the case, unless the spouse is willing to take on everything, right? The woman's willing to take on everything, let her husband learn, do all this, and, that doesn't matter. That's one thing, right? There are some exemplary women out there, that are willing to take on the yoke of everything. My Rebbe's wife of blessed memory didn't do anything. Forget not in the house. She only wanted someone learning all day long. She took care of writing his books. She took care of other things. When he was building his synagogue in Jerusalem, she took care of all that, asked him different questions about it, whatever. But his thing was, she wanted someone learning. And she was willing to do whatever it takes to have someone learning all day long. And she merited to marry one of the Torah giants of the generation. Now, not every woman's going to be able to do that. Not everyone is superhuman, over here. But if a woman says, that's what I want, that's what I'm willing to do, and he doesn't have to lift a hand, and he's just going to learn day in and day out, etc. Okay. At the same time, have some level of connection to family. I know Merv's had, connection to it, to his kids, to his grandkids, etc. Even though, he had other obligations, right? But he was there. Wasn't like he was never there. Now, there could be some other people that were just never there. They were just never around. But, if a person is brought up with the fact that Torah is the most important thing, and Torah learning is the important thing, right? Then, even if husband's not around that much, they understand, they're willing to sacrifice. If a person didn't grow up with that, you can't force that on somebody unless they're holding by it. In other words, you got to help out also. I remember there's a story of someone who's, learning Torah full time, and, he refused to help out in the house. Well, he thought it was like beneath him to help out in the house. So one day, there's a knock on the door. He opens the door, and it was the head of his yeshiva. The story was Rav Gifter of blessed memory. He was the head of the Tel Yeshiva in Cleveland, right? One of the Torah giants of the last generation. And it's like, Rebbe, what are you, Rosh Yeshiva, what are you doing here? And he said, I just came here to take out the garbage. I came here to sweep a little bit, to help out, because, he heard this, this person didn't want to take out the garbage, felt it was beneath him, whatever. And he said, I'm just here to take out the garbage. And he's like, what do you mean? How could I let you take out the garbage? He said, it's not beneath the person to take out the garbage. It's not, it's not beneath the person, not to help out at night. I know, one of my rabbis told me that, when one of his kids, got up in the middle of the night, and his wife needed to sleep, he would take the baby and learn, put the baby over his knee and learn. Okay, that's part of the avoda, that's part of serving God. But to say, oh, that's beneath me, oh, that I would never do, that's a woman's job. Okay, there has to be clarity between husband and wife. If a woman will say, this is exactly what I want, and I don't want you helping, I want you to be learning, I want you to be doing this, I'm a full partner, that's one thing, right? If a person forces it on the other person, and they don't want it, then there's going to be a tremendous amount of resentment, right? A tremendous amount of resentment. You won't have family harmony over here, because the wife will say, "Oh, no, it's too much. Can't pick up the broom.
The big thing.
You can't do this. A person has to. You have to find a balance, right? Going away with family. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not like I know in tithing for the Jewish people, there's a maximum. And so I just try to understand, is there a minimum and a maximum in this relation of Torah study? It's go the extra mile all the time as much as humanly possible.
Let's say out of learning, and their learning cycle is going to get messed up. So that has to be a balance, right? In other words, there's a famous story with Ephraim Zalman Margolius, of blessed memory. He's one of the Torah giants of the last generation, also a tremendous businessman as well. And he told his wife, they made a deal. He told his wife, I'm going to be learning till 2:00 in the afternoon, right? After 2:00, I'll do business. He was very successful in business. He said, but up until 2:00, I don't want my door open. I don't want any phone calls. I don't want any, nothing.
Sure.
That's my time to learn.
Unavailable. Yeah.
Right. I'm not available. So one day, a few merchants come in, and they want to speak to this woman's husband. He says he's not available. He says, listen, we're going to speak to him for 10 minutes. Right? He's going to make more than 10,000 rubles. Right? A fortune in those times. Right? He's going to make a fortune. Right? 10 minutes. That's all we need. And she said, I can't bother him. It can't be disturbed. So they said, don't you think your husband would relent in this one case? And she said, no. And they left. They said, well, okay, we'll do business with someone else. 2:00, her husband comes out, and the wife tells him the story. I mentioned the story before, but it's a good story. The wife tells the husband what happened. And Margolius is jumping around, dancing. He's dancing. And she's like, what are you so excited about? He says, it's unbelievable. He says, God thinks my Torah learning's worth 10,000 rubles. He says, look how valuable, right, that Torah learning is. So unless it's an absolute emergency, someone's got a fixed time to learn, that's it. His spouse should not bother him, unless it's an absolute emergency, right? That is sacred time. If it was at work, would you bother him? Probably not, right? Depends what it is. If it's an absolute emergency, okay, even at work, right? But, a lot of times it's not an emergency. Right? It depends what it is. But let's just say, a lot of times probably not an emergency. So what happens? The person gets taken out. He gets drawn out. It's the same thing. We'll make a little bit of distinction here, but it's a similar thing. Rabbi Akiva returns after 12 years to see his wife and his kids. And he brings with him all his students. He's got all his students there. And he wants to show his wife and kids all his students. So he's about to knock on the door. And he hears his wife say to a friend of hers, if my husband would come in right now, I would tell him to go back and work. I would send him out. He's gone for 12 years. Right? So what did Rabbi Akiva do? Turned around and left. The commentaries ask, I don't get it. Go in, say hello. At least say hello to your kids. Right? And he went back for another 12 years. So why didn't he say hello to his kids? So it's very simple. The idea is that if he learned straight for 12 years, took a break, and then learned another 12 years, that's not 24 years, right? That's not 24 years straight. There's a break in between. You're going to say, oh, it's a short break, whatever. So imagine someone studying for a test, right? I just studied for this stupid, driving thing, which, thank God, some miraculously God had mercy on me that I passed, whatever. But in general, if a person studies, let's say for 2 hours, right? They study for 2 hours. What do? They really study for 45 minutes, took a 15-minute break. Then they studied another 45 minutes and took a 15-minute break, right? So really, they studied 45 and 45 is 90, right? And for 30 minutes, they didn't study. They said, look, I learned for 2 hours. I studied for 2 hours. That's not true, right? Because it took a break in between. Now, anyone, when it comes to, material retention, they'll tell you if you take a break, you lose the momentum of what you had before. In other words, if you're trying to cram information in your head, and it could be you might need just to, air out your mind, take a break.
Digest what you're reading.
Something, whatever, whatever it is. But if you, that can make you lose momentum. At the same time, you can't concentrate, okay, right? But it could cause you to lose momentum, right? If a person is like on a roll, okay, I got this down, I got that down, I got the other thing down, and then you take a break, you lose the momentum, right? So Rabbi Akiva, he would have been the same Rabbi Akiva, right? He certainly would have been the same Rabbi Akiva even if he said hello to his wife and kids, right? The feminists out there will say, oh, look, he didn't even like his wife and kids. Look, he wouldn't even go in to say hello. Nothing. That's how he thought of his wife and kids. No. He had the utmost respect for his wife, but he said, if I go in, I'll get distracted. If I get distracted, it won't be the same, right? It needs to be continual. And I had this argument with somebody, right? I'll tell this story because it's a pretty scary story. That when I left the yeshiva that I was learning in, it was a modern Orthodox Zionistic leaning yeshiva. And before I left, I had a discussion with the head of the yeshiva. And the head of the yeshiva asked me, because you probably read it in this book that I wrote, in my book, I don't know if you remember the story, that he said, I don't care where you go, as long as you're going to do the army, right? As long as you're going to do the army, that's the most important thing. So at that time, I had plenty of money. And so I said, but I have an opportunity now to sit and learn as long as I want, right? Undisturbed, no financial issues, and I could go through the entire Talmud. And I could make something out of myself in Torah. But I said, if I go do the army, in general, and I take 3 years, even though 6 months you learn, and then you go in the army, and then, another, few months you learn, whatever, you alternate between learning and being in the army, right? I said, that's not going to be the same, right? The same story with Rabbi Akiva. It's not going to be the same as if you're doing it straight. Right. And, I didn't get bored of what I was doing. So, I just kept going and going and learning and learning and learning. So, but what was this person saying? And I called this person on it. This person was saying that doing the army, which is a big mitzvah, no question, right? You're protecting the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And you always need a standing army. Even in the time of King David, you had a standing army. So you certainly need a standing army, but you need people to sit and learn. At the same time, that's where the success comes from. You need both. So I said, basically what you're saying is that doing the army is more important than sitting and learning Torah. So this person, who's the head of this yeshiva, said, doing the army is very important. It's an extremely important mitzvah. But I said, but what you're saying is it's more important than learning Torah. My potential is going to get broken up here, right? Now what this person said is 100% heresy, right? Because we say there's nothing more important than learning Torah. Nothing. Now you're going to say, if everyone thought that, there wouldn't be a Jewish army. No, there would be. There would still be an army. Because, not everyone is cut out to sit and learn. But the point is, you always had a standing army, right? But if someone had potential, right? And this is actually, we learned it from this week's Parsha. That says, when did the Levium, I mentioned this in my Parsha video this week. When did the Levium stop working? Right? They stopped working at the age of 50. Right? Now, one place it says they started working because they had to start thinking of the next world, right? By the age of 50. So they started working at the age of 25, one source. Second source in Torah says it started working at 30. So Rashi asked the question on the spot, what is it, 25 or 30? Right? There's a 5-year difference. What's the 5-year difference? So Rashi explains, he brings down from the Talmud says that if a person learns these 5 years, right, they learn these 5 years and they don't see any blessing out of the learning, then they'll never see any blessing out of the learning. In other words, these 5 years are crucial. If the learning goes good, then the person's got unbelievable potential. If the learning doesn't go good, it gets burnt out, whatever, you won't see blessing from it. Right? So then the person will go out to work. So in general, people say, oh, look, my kid learned. Learned till he was 18. Got to do something serious. Got to go to university. Maybe he'll have a grueling schedule. 2 mornings, 2 afternoons a week. And get a degree that he can't use. Beautiful. Spend all this money. So now he's got, but what about potential? What about the potential? They're only starting to learn at that age. They're developing their minds at that age. Right? You got to give them a golden opportunity to learn to see if they have potential. Right? If at that point, over the next number of years, they don't seem like they're gaining or they're growing, then it's never going to happen. Right? That's what Rashi says. Right? You're never going to see that potential. Right? So I said to the head of the yeshiva, I don't know what my potential is. I said, I have no idea. But I said, I got the funds to sit and learn. I said, if I got the funds to sit and learn, and I enjoy learning, why shouldn't I do it? Why shouldn't I try and reach whatever that potential is? Rather than say you still have an obligation to stop, right? And learn Torah. That is heresy. That is telling you doing the army is more important than Torah. That's a big mistake. That's a huge mistake. Now it's a big issue, here in Israel because they say we're shirking our responsibility, right? Because we don't do the army and all, these tens of thousands of people, even though it comes to like 0.001% of the people, age 25 and older that are sitting learning Torah full time, is a very, very small percentage. But people say, why should my kid, potentially die and yours not? Right? Why should you get an exemption and not? But again, from the disaster of the Holocaust, we need as many people sitting and learning as we got to bolster the masses over here. Because the only way we're going to protect the Jewish people in Israel and all around the world is through Torah. Right? Maybe mentioned this week, he said, in what went on during the war, the war of Hamas, he said 4,000 missiles were shot. 670, my number might be a little bit higher, 670 fell in their own territory. That means they shot off missiles that ended up killing their own people. Right? So you got 3,300, let's say. 3,300 missiles that, these missiles are very powerful and very close to Israel. They damage things, they damage buildings, they damage houses. Most of them either got blown up by the Iron Dome or they ended up in empty areas. Right? So my Rebbe said, what are the odds of that? Pretty slim. So, by the non-religious say, wow, it's an absolute miracle. So fine, we don't care about the non-religious. The religious say, this is an absolute miracle. Look what God has done for us and there's minimal damage. Right? My Rebbe says, if you don't get the message, you don't change anything. Mm-hmm. If you didn't wake up and change one thing because of all the miracles, and you admit that these are miracles going on, God could bring it back 10 times worse. We don't want to have to go through that.
No. We
want to get the message. We want to internalize the message, right? But, if we, so you're going to say, well, what if I don't say it's a miracle? Is it heresy to say it's not a miracle? Yeah, at a certain level, right? It certainly is. Because if you see what goes on, just like in the Gulf War, right, 1991, there were 39 Scud missiles, right? 39 Scud missiles all ended up in open areas. Right, one Scud killed someone directly, but they all ended up pretty much in open areas. The odds of that are about zero. Right? If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million and I was going to bet what are the odds 39 are not going to hit a building, you got the stupidest Arabs shooting off these missiles, that boggles the mind. Right? A 0%, I would say it's a 0% chance. You tell me You tell me that, okay, the first one hits nothing. Second one hits nothing. Third one hits nothing, open areas. Fourth one, come on, what are the odds? What are the odds if I take a coin and I flip a coin and all the time it's going to come up heads? What are the odds, right? If I'm going, oh, look at that, it's heads. Look at that, it's heads again. Look at that, it's heads again, right? It's going to hit tails eventually, right?
Probability goes down, yeah.
You're not going to get, 150,000 heads in a row. It's never going to happen, right? The odds of that is zero. Right. So someone, someone took off the Casio watch. I don't know if these still exist, right? Yeah. Casio watch with a calculator, and he starts pushing buttons. Yeah, that could happen. I go, the odds are zero. Mm-hmm. The odds are basically zero. I said, what if it's 1 in a trillion? What if it's one, like the deficit in America, more than a trillion, billion, zillion, whatever. The odds are so small, infinitesimally small. That no one's going to take such a chance, right? Zero, right? It's basically zero. You cannot explain that in a natural way, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? In the late 80s, there was a bombing attack against the Americans in Beirut, killed almost 300 people, right? So God gave a message over here. If I want to, I can wipe out a lot of people in one shot, right? That I have plenty of sources to do that. Right, but to take 39 missiles that hit nothing, again, the odds on that are pretty slim. And 4,000 missiles, even if you say you had 700 that blew up in Gaza itself, and the other 3,400, okay, they did damage, right? They definitely did damage, no question. Didn't do the damage it could have by any, if it would have hit major metropolises, major buildings, in Tel Aviv, Haifa, other places, they could have done unbelievable damage. They could have done, killed thousands, God forbid. But it didn't. It didn't. So how can a person look at that and say, wow, that's nature? You cannot look at it. I mean, you could in theory, right? But you can't really look at it and say that's 100% nature, and that's the way it works, because this is the absolute miracle over here. Now, we not only do we have to acknowledge that, but we also have to do something. We also have to do something and show that God's not doing it for nothing. Because if God thinks in any way, shape, or form, look at all the things I do for you. Look how much I saved you over here. And you didn't even change anything. You just went and continued as if it were nothing. God brought the world to its knees in the last year and change. Destroyed people's businesses, destroyed people's lives, Black Lives Matter, all these other things. God brought the entire world, to its knees.
Yep.
And what does everybody want? Everyone wants to go back to normal, right? Like somebody said, even if we have to be in lockdown, thank God for Netflix. No, that's not the answer, right? If God brings a microbe to the world, he brings a microbe to the world. I can understand it hits one place, maybe even a couple places. Right. But the fact that it took it shook the scientific community, and it put them upside down, and they had no idea how to deal with it. And each government, some of them didn't survive because of the way they handled it. They had no idea what they were doing, and it took them a long time. One microbe, right? One microbe. So now, pretty much here in Israel it's been eradicated. Now people are getting sick with colds and the flu because, no one's wearing masks and all that, right? But, there aren't really, any cases of COVID and all that. Still, even with all that, God shut down the entire world. By shutting down the entire world, having to be alone with ourselves, right? That is worse than death. Why? Because a person never, ever wants to look at themselves in the mirror, right? In other words, I always say we got to take stock of everything we do on a daily basis to know what we have to work on, right? Because some people say, okay, you have to work on this. You have to work on that. This is the message. Rabbi says, we don't know if any of these are the message. We're going to work on everything. Well, how are we supposed to work on everything? Working on everything's kind of hard, right? The person has to make a chart. You have to make a list, right? See, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I have to work on. But if you do that on a daily basis, you think about what I set out to accomplish. Did I accomplish it? Didn't I accomplish it? How did I, whatever. We know exactly where we're holding. The problem is nobody wants to be alone with themselves. Imagine someone is alone with themselves, no TV, no handheld device, no connection to the outside world. They're stuck with books at home, and that's it. Most people would go absolutely out of their minds, right? Can't play, okay, maybe play board games, other things, whatever it is. But being alone with yourself is worse than death. Why? Because you could be doing something.
Right.
The reason most, even though most people are on Prozac today, which is true, which is probably true, nonetheless, we don't want to have to deal with ourselves. Because when we look in the mirror, we might just take a knife and kill ourselves because, we've done this wrong, we've done that wrong, we've hurt other people. As we always say, if you live in the past, you have no future, but you have to take stock. You have to think about what my goals are, what they should be, right? Why does the Torah say at the age of 50, Levites don't work anymore? They're put out to pasture. Why they put out, today would be like 60, 62. They just, okay, we're retiring you early. That's it. You'll be on, you get Social Security, you'll be on pension, finished, right? But in the end, why at the age of 50? So maybe brought down, as I spoke this week, that you have to start thinking about the next world, right? Even by the age of 50. You got to start thinking about this world as we're going to see one day, right? The next millennium, right? That this world's a portico. This world is a portico to the next world. If it's a portico to the next world, then I have to use my time properly, efficiently. I got to think about what I do. I have to think about how I deal with others. I have to think about how I deal with myself, right? And I'll tell you a story, right? A story happened this week.
Okay.
The story was that I told you about this driving course. Now, I'd memorized. I spent a certain amount of time, just going through this book. I didn't want to fail. And you gotta, again, I didn't think it was like such an easy test, but there are certain things you could have got messed up on, etc. And you had to get 5 out of 10. Now, 5 out of 10, it's not 26 out of 30, right? So, if you knew the material, you know the material. You got a few wrong here. Okay, you get a 70, you get a 60, you get an 80, no big deal, you pass. They want you to pass. Anyway, so I was convinced, after I messed up on a few things, I was convinced, I was pretty convinced. I said, there's no way I passed. I was like, I'm going to have to take this again. I have to go down there. It was a pain in the neck to go there. My wife was pretty convinced she passed, whatever, and whatever. I was thinking like, oh, this was a mistake. That's a mistake. I was like, I had to get at least 2 out of 7 right. And I just couldn't think that, either I did it or not. But what was my mentality? I mean, I ended up passing, so thank God for that. God had a lot of mercy on me. God had a lot of mercy, right? I mean, I'm not saying it was such a hard test, but whatever. But the point is, what was I thinking? What was my mentality? My mentality was, you got to be an idiot to fail this. There are people that I guarantee, not as a seasoned driver and this and that. Why should they pass and I not pass, right? And you're thinking, oh, I should have studied better. I should have done, then you start to second guess. I could have done this better. I could have done that. I should have looked at this. They didn't give you that much time to study because obviously, they didn't make the test that hard, right? But, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel so good. Now you're going to say, why would you beat yourself up for something stupid, right? At the end of the day, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is I would have to take the test again, study a little bit more seriously, take the test again, right? And God forbid you failed it. You have 3 chances. If you fail the 3rd time, you have to take the course again. You have to take the course over again. Again, it was brutal. It was 4 hours. You had one break for like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, whatever. It was brutal just to have to sit there in a mask, whatever, the whole thing. I mean, I'm saying the instructors made it entertaining, right? But, the idea is if you look in the mirror, something like this, someone's going to say, come on, this is something really stupid. Why would you get, even uptight about it? So what's the big deal? So the big deal, you might have failed it. Okay, you might have failed it, right? So you got to take it again. Like, is that the end of the world? But what's the idea, right? How do you perceive yourself, right? Now, if you're someone like me, like, the ultimate competitor, you don't like to lose, right? You never like to lose.
Prepare properly.
Not,
Yeah, you should.
not a video game. I'm not saying you have to cheat, right? But, not at video games. It depends, it depends what it is, right? When I played ball, and even if I, played great, whatever, we still lost, felt bad, felt bad. It hurts, so to speak. But, why? Because, if you want to be the ultimate competitor, no one likes to lose. You ask anyone, now imagine, right? Let's make this really graphic. Now imagine, it comes to, let's say football, right? There are 25 teams, 26 teams, whatever it is. And you get to the Super Bowl and you lose. You have a bad game plan, whatever it is, even if it's a close game, doesn't matter. You lose, right? The whole goal is to win, right? But you finish better than 24 other teams. You finish second, right? Vince Lombardi, right? Vince Lombardi, famous coach, the Green Bay Packers, says, I finished twice a number of times. That's the worst feeling to ever have. Right? I don't know exact quote, but it's something similar to that. In other words, if you don't finish first, you're a loser. Right? In other words, you lost. It doesn't matter if you finish second. What are you talking about? You finished better than 24 other teams. Right? But what is our mentality? Our mentality is finishing better than 24 is not enough. You got to finish first. You got to be the best. Now, if you're that ultimate competitive, anytime you don't do what you think you should have done, I had times where I studied. I studied for a test, and then, I got overpsyched. I get to the test and drew blanks. Sometimes I drew blanks, and I didn't do as good as I should have.
Right.
And then you say, why does this happen? And forget finishing first. Right? Not an issue of finishing first, but you want to accomplish what you set out to do. Right? I didn't set out to get a 75. That wasn't what I set out to do. I set out, I didn't think I was going to get 100, right? But I certainly didn't think I was going to get a 75, right? And there were certain things, obviously, there were mistakes made that never should have been made, right? It was carelessness. And that's carelessness. You misread the question. I'll just tell, like in this test I took, it was they call it a Mivchan Amerikai, right? An American test, multiple choice. That's what they call it. Multiple choice is like an American test. I don't know why. So anyway, obviously they give you a pencil, you got to fill it in, right? Now, when I was looking at it, I wasn't really paying attention, and in each question had 4 answers, right? But it started from 4, 3, 2, 1. See, in Israel everything's backwards, like. Something, it's like in Europe, right? If you tell the date today is the 29th of May. So for Americans, we'd say it's 5/29. Here in Israel and in Europe, you would say it's 29. 29 is the date, is the day. 5th is the month, right? You do it backwards, right? So here I wasn't really paying attention. I just want to take this exam and just get the heck out of there. And each question from 1 to 10 was 4, 3, 2, 1. So the ones I knew straight away, I started filling in. And then I realized I filled in the wrong ones. Why? Because it didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4. It went 4, 3, 2, 1. So I realized, the answer, I put the answer as 1. I'm like, wait a minute, the answer isn't 1. The answer is 4, right? At least this one I knew, right? The answer was 4, but I did it backwards, right? But I caught myself, right? Now, I would have been really mad if I would have done that through the whole test and I just passed it in because I didn't pay attention, right? Even if I knew all the answers, right? You got them, you got most of them wrong because you just filled it in the wrong way. Now, what are you going a person can beat themselves up and say, listen, it just cost me money. I had to take this course anyway. So now I just wasted the time. I wasted the study time because I was too quick to think, about what I was doing. I should just taken my time, relaxed, read the question. It was in English. We took it in English, right? Read the question, filled in the answers, and that's it, right? But if a person's under pressure, they're thinking about other things, you don't concentrate, right? And then you see, wait a minute, this is all backwards. I did that for a couple answers, and I realized it was backwards. I was like, oh, you're not going to catch me on this. You're not going to get me on this. But, but again, this is something stupid. And what does the evil inclination do? Oh, look, 98% of the people pass and you failed, and you really knew the answer, but you blew it, and you did. So what do we do? So what do? We overthink. It's like, oh, I'm not really good enough. I tried to learn. I made a mistake. I tried to do this. I made a mistake and I failed. And what does the evil inclination do? Sledgehammer. The evil inclination comes, and I'm not even talking about something stupid. The evil inclination comes and says, oh, you really think you're something in Torah? You made a simple mistake with this. You made a simple mistake with that. And you say, wait a minute, I don't understand. People are listening to my classes. How can I make such a simple mistake? How could I have thought that this was really the answer? Why didn't I get the right answer like that? So you can say, well, it's a test, it's this. You say, why would you put so much pressure on yourself? So we do that because we want to succeed. We want to be the best we can be. But the problem is we have lapses. We have lapses for any number of reasons, right? And I think one of the main reasons is we just don't think. It's like, I'll give another example. I went to, I usually go on Thursday to a supermarket with one of my kids. And, it's a nice size supermarket for Israel, but whatever, it's cramped, it's crowded. You can't fit more than like 3-4 people in an aisle. It's got a certain amount of space, but they open up a new place 3-4 times the amount. It's huge, right? You could have it could be crowded there. You wouldn't even know it because, the aisles are huge. So I'd just, push my daughter just to feel like it was crowded, just to feel it. Right. But in this other place, you feel like one of my kids said, it's like when you walk in, the first thing you want to do is leave. Right. That's the first thing you want to do because you feel like, everyone's on top of you, and okay. So you go in, do what you have to do. You go out, however long it takes. This other thing with a breeze, first of all, I went on a Tuesday, but it doesn't matter. Right. There was really nobody there. Right. But even if there were people there, it wouldn't have mattered. It's not going to be that, it's not going to be that crowded because the place is absolutely humongous. So you go in, you come out of there like you're feeling like, $1 million. Doesn't matter how much you spent in there. Prices are comparable. But why do you feel much different? Because there's no pressure. You don't feel like someone's standing on top of you. So we live in a world today, it's a powder keg. We feel the pressure. We get up, I got to do this, got to do that.
Oh,
you got to do anything. We got to pray.
Yeah.
Gotta this. We have to fit everything into our lives, right? Mm-hmm. But we forget one thing: we're human. I forgot this. It's funny. I went to synagogue last night. I got halfway there, and what did I realize? I didn't have my hat. I said, "How can I go to synagogue without a hat?" I said, "How in the world did anyone stop me going out the door? I didn't have my hat on." So I had to go back. I went back, got my hat, whatever. I got to put, get my uniform together. Put it on, and that's it. But again, if a person's not thinking, it's very easy to have a lapse. That's what this world is, right? This world, is a world of struggle. And since it's a world of struggle, we can make mistakes. But if we're living in an uptight world and we ourselves are uptight and we ourselves want to do as much as we can to get to perfection, and if we make a mistake that we shouldn't have made, right? The evil inclination has a field day. The evil inclination, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, look at all the years of learning. Look, you still made a mistake. Oh, look, you still did, you still did this, right? Yep. So you're going to say, well, I need to learn how to chill. And the reality is I have to learn how to take things in stride. We have to learn when we make mistakes. We have to learn we're not perfect, right? But, we have to set a certain standard. I'm not saying you have to set the lowest standard, right? But at the same time, we want to be the best we can be. Right? Because we are going to lack. There are going to be a lot of lack in us that God's going to shred us for. Right? That there's no question, but we want to try and minimize that. That's why we said before, you never know how we get to the beginning of all this. Right? And that is, we want to go beyond the letter of the law. right? That's the message. Because you're going to ask me, okay, we're gone for 2 hours, right? What's the message? The message is that even if we keep what we're supposed to keep, we can't get so caught up in the detail, we forget that we're human, right? We forget that we make mistakes. You can't just say, oh, your Rebbe says, you live in the past, you have no future. It's not enough. You can't just blow that off and say that, right? You have to realize, yeah, I don't want to make the same mistake again. I remember once, I'll give another example. I was once, my parents' synagogue, I was reading Torah, and I, flubbed up here, flubbed up there, and it bothered me, right? It just bothered me. So, someone consoled me or tried to console me and said, listen, nobody's perfect, but, why did I really feel bad, right? What was really going on? Because deep down, my soul was telling me this is holy, right? Even if I didn't understand what that meant, right? And my soul was telling me, what are you doing making a mistake, pronouncing it wrong, right? Even if I didn't understand that, right? So not just, oh, you're reaching for perfection. You made a mistake. Okay, it's no big deal. God's law, what do you mean it's no big deal? That could be the difference between life and death. That's what life is over here, right? We have to be the best we can be. We have to realize that we're human, but we can't just say, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I made the same mistake. Oh, I made the same mistake again. No. We have to nip it in the bud. We have to work hard. And the only way to do it is to keep learning, to keep reviewing, to keep going through these ideas to make the mind be the same as the heart. Because once I understand the bigger picture, as the Avos said, I have to put that into action and I have to live it. Because if I don't, it doesn't matter what my mind tells me. It doesn't matter what I know. Doesn't matter what the right thing to do is. 100% of my language, I blew it, right? And if I blew it, I can't take that back now. I can repent. I can try and work on it again. So you're going to say, but there are going to be holes in all of us, 100%, right? We want to minimize that. We want to be better without the evil inclination coming and saying, you're no good. You'll never be good. It'll never happen. It's an impossibility. You can't ever know all this stuff. The evil inclination is very good at what it does. It's very, very good, at what it does. Jews won't accept you. Non-Jews will think you're a bunch of fruitcakes. All these other things. That may all be true, but so what? Just because it's hard, just because it's all these things doesn't mean I have to. I don't have to persevere. Doesn't mean I have to beat myself up and say, Rabbi said he's the ultimate competitor. I also want to be the ultimate competitor, right? But it comes at a price, right? It comes at a price, right? And I'm not going to say it's a great price, in different ways, right? And the reason is because it can destroy your psyche. It can absolutely destroy your psyche because if you set the bar so high that you cannot reach, that's impossible to reach, evil inclination will let you do that also. The evil inclination will say, go ahead, set it high. Set it so high. Go ahead. I'm going to let you try and reach all these spiritual levels because at some point you're going to fail and then you're going to go zoom. You're going to go zoom down that ladder. You're going to fall right on your head. And once you fall on your heads, your brains come out and it's over, right? I'm not going to get graphic here, meaning that you couldn't uphold what you set to do. Right. And if you couldn't uphold what you set to do, then as we mentioned, as my Rebbe said, take on something, work on, something that you can do. Because if you say, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take on something, I want to learn better, 10 minutes more a day, 20 minutes a day, whatever, but let's say you don't end up doing it. Do something, take on something I know I can do, right? Once you do that, you build momentum, right? But if you bite off more than you can chew, if you try and reach for the heavens, you're going to fall flat in your face. That you can, that you cannot do. So we don't want to do just the minimal. Someone will say, just do the minimal. That's fine. So, I'll hit a minimal level, but that's all God wants. He wants you to raise yourself to whatever level you can, to the highest level possible, right? And go beyond, right? Because the reality is that what we're doing here, a person may think, oh, I can never reach this. I can never do that. Maybe a person can. But, my Rebbe would say, if you shoot, for, you have to shoot high. If I shoot for the moon, I may not reach the, if I shoot for the stars, I may not reach the stars.
Yeah.
I may reach the moon, but I may not reach the stars. Right? So say if you think big, you may not end up big. But if you think small, you'll definitely end up small. Yeah.
Well, Rabbi, in like what you're saying, I found that there are certain times in life where if you don't seize an opportunity, it can pass you by. And I know that Hashem rules it all, but I know He knows all our days before one of them yet began. And the reality is, if we don't walk like you're saying, trying to go the extra mile, we may miss an opportunity that will never come around again. Am I incorrect in this?
When it comes to opportunity, a person could blow it. That is definitely true. It doesn't mean it'll never come back. It depends what it is, right? We have to take advantage. We have to take advantage of every opportunity, and there are times where a person doesn't, and you lost it, right? The opportunity is lost. How many people would say, well, I could have invested in this, could have invested in that, and you didn't, right? And the thing goes up, a lot. You could have invested at a minimal level, and you could have done very well.
Yep.
Right? You could have done very well after a while. I could have, should have, thought of, whatever. Certain things passes by. True. There are certain things that may never come back, right? But there are people, let's say in the process of conversion, that sometimes they get thrown off. Sometimes other things happen, and sometimes they do end up coming back. Right? Sometimes not. It depends. It depends on the circumstances. I can't say across the board a lost opportunity is always lost. That's
no,
a person.
No.
Person
Hashem knows. So
a person can get distracted. Person can get, can be in a bad place. A person wanted to do the right thing and they got taken around in a circle. They got taken for a song and a dance. But eventually they come back. Not everybody does. People flop around also. Yeah. God could give a person ample opportunities. Right. Put different things in their path, and they don't take it, and that's bad. That's going to be bad because God's going to say, "I gave you this opportunity, that opportunity." He said you didn't take it. It's like the person drowning. God says, "Save me." Sends the Coast Guard. Says, "No, God save me." Sends him a boat. God save me. Sends him something else. The guy drowns. Right. So the guy goes upstairs. He says, "God, why didn't you save me?" He said, "What are you talking about? I sent you the Coast Guard. I sent you the boat. I sent you this." You didn't listen. Right? You didn't listen. So we're given opportunities. Sometimes we have to take opportunities. Right? Also, we might have to be a little bit aggressive. Right? That's how I developed my connection to my Rebbe. That I forced my way in, which doesn't always work. Right? But for some reason God had mercy on me and allowed me in. Right? But nothing comes to someone just by sitting back and doing nothing. Unless you have absolute faith. That means you don't rely on God for anything. Right? That's different. But most people are not that way. So, we have to put our best foot forward. Now, sometimes an opportunity comes. We think it's a great opportunity. We didn't get it. It didn't work out. And then we're kicking ourselves. I wish it could have been this, could have been that, could have been the other thing. Could have done this, done that. It didn't work. Right? 100% it didn't work. So you're going to say, I don't understand what happened. It was a golden opportunity. But then we see in the future, other things work out. You know what they say? If a door is closed or two doors are closed, another door is going to open somewhere. I mean, I'll give one example of my own life, right? I got slammed when I was in South America. I left South America. Yeah. Went to America, got involved in real estate. That didn't work. Came back to Israel. Got involved in conversion, right? When I was in the States, pretty much almost by accident in general. Nothing happens by accident, but, etc. And who would have thought, years down the road, this is what I would be doing. In general, based on my own life experience, helping others, different things, I wouldn't have thought it in a million years, right? One opportunity closed. Something else seemed to open, got slammed 2008 because of the mortgage crisis in America, right? Got involved in conversion at that point, came back to Israel, and I'm not going to say the rest is history, right? There's a lot of struggle along the way, but still, all things being equal, doors were open. Right, in different ways. Still waiting to see the fruition of other things. Okay, whenever it's going to happen, whenever God wants to open those doors. But but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Right. I told a friend of mine who was having a lot of difficulty. I said, listen, the struggles I went through.
Yeah.
Etc. I said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, it wasn't pretty. Some of it was, my own doing, my own mistakes. But, in the end, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it was better, sometimes not. But your faith has to be like the rock of Gibraltar. Basically, even if we put ourselves in bad situations, what are our prayers? What should they be? We should be saying, God, you're the one in charge. You put me in this situation, I have to be better, etc. I have to work harder, but you're the one in control. That's it. Ein od milvado, right? God is the only one. We're not relying on man. We're not relying on our intellect. We're not relying because I'm such a great speaker and everybody loves me. No. If God wills it and God blesses it, it'll happen. If he doesn't want to bless it, doesn't matter what you do, right? He's the one who's ultimately in control. We have to lay ourselves down to that, right? Down to him. So our mantra has to be, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve that. I'll just tell you another personal story. I thought for sure, no question, I failed this test. I made a deal. I'm not going to say what the deal was, but I made a deal. I said, God, you get me through this test. I don't have to take it again. I'm going to take on X, Y, and Z. My wife's like, you really did that? You said, you really thought you failed? I said, I definitely thought I failed. I don't think there's any question about it. But okay. And I got this email on Friday, and I was shocked. I was really shocked I passed. But okay. God has his ways. But the bottom line is God's the one in control. And, if he wants me to struggle, you'll struggle. But you have to lay yourself down and say, you are the one in charge. Now, does that mean overnight things are going to change? No. Can God change anything, in the blink of an eyelash? 100%. Right? He doesn't need people to die. It's not about inheritance, it's not about other things. If he wants things to change, they will. And there were times, again, I saw things happen. Things happen. I got bailed out in different ways. I never in a million years would have expected. Never. Right? And, that's God blinking his eyes saying, see, you don't think I'm here? Don't worry. I'm taking care of you. But then you look around and say, well, okay, this came through the back door. Something totally not expected, but at the same time, guess what? He just got me out of Dodge, right? He just got me out of this, predicament or whatever. And it's like a wink. God's saying, I'm still, so, okay, made you suffer, made you go through other things, fine, right? But what did he do? He just gave you a wink over here. He's saying, don't forget, I'm still here because I can change, anything in the bat of an eyelash, right? But we have to believe that, and we have to believe he's the one in control, and it has nothing to do with me, right? Again, we have to put our best foot forward. That's the idea. But, at the same time, we have to let God do what he needs to do.
Well, you said there right at the end that it has nothing to do with us. Wow. Is that really the case?
We have to put our best foot forward.
Right.
So putting your best foot forward, if our business isn't going well, whatever, say, okay, I'm going to try this, right? I'm going to try that. I'm going to try the other thing, right? Now, it may be a good thing, in a business way, and things may turn around, or maybe not. But what's the X factor? God's the X factor, right? You're not sitting back and doing nothing. You're putting your best foot forward. That's what business is. Right? Advertising, other things. You're putting your best foot forward. Now, does that mean you're guaranteed? Doesn't mean anything. No. It just means I have to put my best foot forward. That's what it means. And if God says yay, great. And he blesses it, tremendous. If he doesn't matter what your best foot is.
That's right.
You have to evoke divine mercy that God takes you out of this predicament. Right? And a person has to remember also, when it comes to money, whatever money you're supposed to have, you'll have. And if, you're supposed to lose it when it comes to, dental issues, other things, okay. But, I asked the, great rabbi once, I said, yeah, I got bailed out, but I need this money like 2 months ago. And so this rabbi told me that's exactly when you're supposed to get it, right now. God gave it to you now. No, but I needed it 2 months ago. But obviously, he gave it to you now. So forget about 2 months ago. In the right time means when you get it. That's what it means. Whether you think you need it before or not doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter. The fact is God will give it to you when he thinks he needs, to give it to you. And that means we might get squeezed. That means, we have to pray better. We have to work better. And then at some point God says, okay, I'll take this away a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of breathing space, right? Then we say, you but imagine how hard it was before. True. But again, whatever we do, we have to remember he's the one in charge. We're not the ones in charge over here. And we forget that. Just like that song, Fame, I'm going to live forever. Forget it. right? God's the
Yeah.
one in charge. Not
Don't
about
take
me.
anything for granted.
He cannot take, exactly. We cannot take anything for granted, as we saw before. We don't know what today's going to bring. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? We have no idea. Like someone my in-laws knew in their mid-60s, clean bill of health, went to the doctor, no problem. Month later, 2 months later, massive stroke. A few months after that,
Bam.
that was it. So nobody knows. Nobody knows what tomorrow's going to bring. We have to live today to the best we can. That's what we have to do, day in and day out.
Wow. So well said. I really love how you brought out today about the effectiveness of Torah, but the whole message that, we need to do what we can and go the extra mile.
But we have to do it. We can't just say it.
Well, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for improvement, accepting that no, Hashem is in total control.
You're right, but once we say it, it obligates us, right? So you're going to say, well, maybe I shouldn't say it. No, if a person says it, then what does it do? Then it becomes, okay, now I said it. Now it's out there in the world. Now it's more than part of my psyche. Once it's more part of my psyche, then you got to get kicked in the butt and you have to go out and do it, right? That's a little more difficult, but if you don't get to that point, you'll never go out and do it because it's not part of your psyche anymore.
Wow. Beautiful stuff in there, Rabbi. I want to thank you. Are we winding her down for this week?
Part 7. I mean, we're probably going to get to part 10 because we didn't get through, pretty much anything here today. But, nonetheless,
well, no, it's great that you planned it out. You can see you planned out the message. There's so much. I know there's depth to share, but you can tell you've planned out sharing this today. I mean, there's a whole roundabout angle there. I'll
tell you like this: the method to the madness. If I would think, before I give a class, what's going to come out of my mind? What I want to speak about. So I have a certain idea, right? How it's going to come out. If I think about it 10 different times, it'll come out 11 different ways. Certain things that came out tonight wasn't even my intention. Not at all. But, okay, I made a connection from one thing to another, whatever. And, and it's what we call heavenly help. Because I remember when I first gave a class, I started quoting something. I said, where did that come from? I quoted a piece of Talmud I hadn't seen in a long time. I was like, where did that come from? Because it's there, right? Someone who speaks to the public, they have a special heavenly help. Right, tremendous amount of heavenly help, and if whatever however the message comes out, I always say, from the beginning to the end, how I'm able to wrap things around from the end to the beginning and tie it all together is miraculous. It's like, because I can't tell you one thing's going to go to another, and I'm going to tie the whole thing together. Sometimes it works perfectly, other times, okay, it might be a stretch. Right,
today was a good one,
But, I'm self-taught. God's helped me in a lot of ways. I mean, not self-taught. He's done everything, right? But, the importance of the message, I do have that idea. There's no question.
We're glad you passed your test.
Just that if we get the message, and we think about it, we internalize it, then that helps us reach our potential.
Rabbi, we appreciate you. So Hashem willing, if we are going to go on next week, I may be back on with Rabbi Poston. So we would have to keep our class to 90 minutes. Okay, I love letting you freestyle because you just go.
I can't do any earlier because
right.
Shabbos just comes out too late. So that wouldn't give me a chance to rejuvenate. A drop or at least whatever. So whatever, 9:30 still works. 2:30 Eastern time still going to work for probably at least
my schedule has changed
it'll be an hour and a half.
My schedule has changed a little bit if you ever wanted to switch days, and that way we could keep you, because I know you love to get going, and if you want to have that 120 minutes or longer, if we switch to date, it's something to contemplate. But Hashem knows, I'm trying to move with this class as you would have it, just to put it out there. But I'm thankful for the message today and everyone you shared. And I just double checked before. It's not our 65th; it's our 66th today. So it's just beautiful to see. This has been quite a journey, and to see you break these last couple down in 10 parts. For it's there's so much that needs to be
said. The irony of all ironies is somehow, somewhere, we're gonna knock the CFL. That's just the way it is, and it always comes out. I don't know how, but it's just there.
Well, I'm in Canada. What can I say? Football. I spent the time I'm from Southern Ontario, and I'll tell you, my home team's from there, but I spent a decade in the prairies in the Midwest, and the Midwest, they got nothing else. I mean, they got hockey. I mean, it's like a hockey rink in Saskatchewan for the whole winter. It's just a flat land, right? So, there's not much else, and so they support their football to death, and they're just wonderful people. But it is a bit of a distraction for many of them. Paint their faces and just, you see that. Get all animalistic. Game day. Ah!
Right. No, 100%.
So Hashem willing, are we on for next week, Rabbi?
We are on for next week.
All right. Well, folks, you can always find Rabbi Coffman. His site's back up, orthodoxconversion.com. You can check him out there.
Yep. You should check on the bottom of the first page. I have a whole bunch of, videos about how to find a Jewish community and about making blessings, Shabbos blessings, Kiddush, and all that. So all those videos are there. How to shake a lulav, how to light a menorah, right? And I'll put some other things up there as well. And once I get a chance, so you can check it out there. Beautiful.
That's orthodoxconversion.com. So we're going to sign off for today, folks. We want to thank you all for attending on Facebook and YouTube, the Noahide World Center, and especially we thank you, Rabbi Coffman, for sharing and shining the light of Torah out of the nation of Israel. The world so needs it now more than ever, and we keep praying for Mashiach now. So till next week, folks, Hashem willing, we'll be back. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.